No one rushes, no one raises their voice. Even the children, often lively and mischievous, seem to mirror the mood of the afternoon, gathering smooth shells along the shore, inspecting beetles on fence posts, or watching the movements of adults with wide, thoughtful eyes. Dogs nap again in the shade, only lifting their heads when someone walks past with a scrap of cloth or a piece of fish. Ingrid pauses her work to stretch her arms, looking up at the sky that now carries the golden hue of late afternoon, and her gaze drifts toward the sea, its surface calm and glittering beneath the soft sun. The boats remain at rest for now, tethered gently and swaying in rhythm with the waves, their curved hulls etched with stories of years past, paint faded, wood smoothed, but still strong, still capable. The village forge, set a bit apart from the homes to catch the breeze, lets out a few lazy puffs of smoke as a young apprentice reheats a metal hook, not for weapons or war, but for a simple hinge that will fix a loose door at the smokehouse. Every action feels embedded with purpose, not grand, but essential, not urgent, but enduring. Nearby, an elder sits on a fur-draped bench, weaving together thin reeds into a flat basket, his movements slow but precise, his lips parting occasionally in low, tuneless hums that speak more to memory than melody. The breeze carries the scent of pine from the hills and seaweed from the shoreline, wrapping itself around the buildings and racks and people like a familiar shawl, light and grounding all at once. Above, birds glide in widening circles, casting brief shadows that pass over rooftops and feet before vanishing. Ingrid continues her mending, pausing only to tie off a final knot, then gently folds the net and places it beside the others. She reaches for a second, more damaged one, and begins again, her expression serene, her fingers sure, her breathing slow and deep, in rhythm with the quiet world around her. The village feels in this hour like a living memory, an ongoing moment where nothing extraordinary happens, and yet everything matters, where people exist not in competition with nature, but as its companions, its caretakers, and its children. And you, dear listener, who remain nestled in the calm flow of this day, may feel the pull of this slow, sacred pace within your own body, the soft gravity of peace, the warmth of sunlight across your skin, the quiet echo of fingers knotting. Thread. Let your breath follow the gentle pull of the thread. Let your thoughts drift with the wind that wraps around corners and flows through hair, and let your body remain still in the soft embrace of afternoon, here, in this village that breathes without shouting, that works without rush, that mends and prepares with the patience of centuries. You are welcome to stay as long as you wish. No obligation, no end time, no noise, just the comfort of steady hands, familiar air, and the whisper of waves nearby, holding you in a world where everything moves, but nothing hurries, as the afternoon sun continues its slow descent across the pale blue sky, casting longer, more golden shadows over the Viking coastal village. The focus of the day's quiet energy gently shifts towards storage and preparation, where the bounty dried in the days before must now be protected, sorted, and stored with care to ensure it endures the coming weeks and seasons. Along the edge of the village, Where the grassy slope gives way to a stony rise overlooking the sea, the smokehouse and communal storage buildings rest in partial shadow, their weathered wooden walls streaked with age and salt, their heavy doors slightly ajar as villagers move in and out, arms full with bundles of wrapped fish, coiled twine, and folded cloths. The scent here is different from the open air near the drying racks or the sweet warmth of the hearths. It is darker, deeper, more pungent with salt, smoke, cured meat, dried herbs, and earth. It lingers in the throat and the memory, not unpleasant, but unmistakably ancient, part of a rhythm of survival, as old as the people themselves. Inside the smokehouse, thick wooden beams overhead are darkened with years of soot, and faint trails of smoke still rise from low coals buried in shallow pits beneath the center of the structure, where new fish are sometimes hung for finishing, their skins stiff and curled, their oils glistening faintly in the filtered light. Ingrid steps into the doorway, adjusting her grip on a wide basket lined with linen and packed with neatly folded parcels of dried cod and herring, each piece cleaned, cured, and packed according to a process passed down through generations. Her steps are quiet on the packed dirt floor, and the sound of her boots blends with the subtle creaks of wood, the faint hissing of cooling embers, and the occasional murmur from another villager farther inside. A long table runs along the side wall, worn smooth by decades of use, where bundles are unwrapped, checked again for dryness, then wrapped anew with tighter folds, and labeled using etched wooden markers, their surfaces notched with simple symbols, lines, dots, or rune-like shapes that speak of dates, contents, family names, and seasons. Beside her, another woman works silently, her face lit by a thin beam of sunlight slicing down through a narrow roof slat. And together they share a nod, no words needed, their movements flowing in quiet harmony as baskets are placed, opened, sorted, repacked. The air is warm and still, thick with the aroma of preservation, the sense that time here does not race forward, but spirals gently inward, coiling around the hands that sort and the minds that remember. Outside the door, children's laughter still rises faintly from the village center, and the muffled sound of a wooden mallet tapping gently on a beam echoes through the open space between houses. But here in the smokehouse, time slows, breath deepens, and the only urgency is in doing the task well, ensuring nothing is wasted, nothing forgotten. Once the fish are checked and stored, Ingrid moves toward the adjoining building, where the salted barrels are kept, tucked into the coolest shadows of the structure, their round tops sealed with wax and pressed cloth. A younger boy stands there, watching, holding a small bucket of brine, his expression serious as he waits for instruction. With a small smile, Ingrid nods, takes the bucket from him, and begins slowly pouring its contents over one of the open barrels, refreshing the salt solution while checking that the fish below are still submerged and untouched by mold. It is a process that must be repeated often, not because of failure, but because of the nature of preservation. Ongoing, attentive, tender in its constancy. From the ceiling above hang bundles of drying herbs and strips of meat, swaying slightly as the air shifts when the door opens or someone passes by. The light now grows dimmer, more amber, and the outlines of objects lengthen across the floor. The edge of a basket, the profile of a stool, the shadow of Ingrid's hand as it moves slowly over the cloth cover of a sealed jar. Everything here is practical, but everything is also sacred in its own quiet way. Each act part of a chain that connects past to present to future, a kind of prayer made with twine and salt, and hands that know what to do without needing to be told. As she finishes her work, Ingrid steps back into the open air, blinking slightly as the brightness of the late afternoon meets her eyes. The sky now softened with hints of rose and gold, the wind cooler, carrying the early whispers of evening. She wipes her hands on the side of her dress, stretches her shoulders, and exhales slowly, looking back once at the smokehouse, its roof sloping low, its walls solid, and feeling within her not exhaustion, but a kind of deep calm, a grounding peace that comes only after completing something necessary with care. Others continue to move past her, entering and exiting, lifting, sorting, nodding, quietly exchanging places in the flow of labor that never truly ends. Only shifts form with the turning of the day, and you, dear listener, walking softly alongside this world with your eyes half closed and your thoughts growing lighter, may feel the weight of that calm settling into you as well, like the scent of smoke in cloth, like the salt in air, like the memory of steady hands preparing what must be preserved. Let it hold you now, like linen around fish, like twine tied tight, not in confinement, but in safety, in warmth, in knowing that you too are stored gently within something timeless, something meant to last, here, in the shadows of the smokehouse, with golden light above and cool earth below. You are protected, remembered, and cradled in peace. As the afternoon leans gently toward evening, and the sky above the Viking coastal village begins to shift from gold to a softer amber hue, the calm hush of the day is interrupted not by noise or alarm, but by a distant, rhythmic creaking, wooden hulls brushing against water, oars slicing slowly through the gentle waves, and the muffled voices of returning fishermen carried faintly across the inlet on the cool sea breeze. The boats, which had set out earlier in the morning under skies still touched by mist and starlight, now begin to reappear along the watery horizon, their dark forms growing clearer against the backdrop of the glowing sky, sails low or furled entirely, their movement steady and deliberate as they glide homeward, guided by hands calloused and skilled, eyes used to reading the subtle signs of tide and wind. Along the curved stone beach that cradles the harbor, a few villagers rise from their afternoon tasks to stand watch, their silhouettes outlined in the fading light as they peer toward the horizon, spotting the recognizable shapes of each vessel. The boat with the red-marked prow, the one with the patched sail, the small skiff that always trails slightly behind the others. Children run ahead, bare feet padding quickly over the packed earth path that leads down to the docks, laughter ringing out in anticipation as they race to see what might be brought back today. Perhaps a particularly large catch, or a rare shell, or merely the return of someone they love. Dogs bark softly, tails wagging as they join the procession, sniffing the salty air with curiosity and excitement. The sea itself seems to welcome the boats back with calm waves and wide reflections of the amber clouds above, the surface like smooth glass, broken only by the wakes of the vessels and the occasional leap of a fish disturbed by their passage. As the boats near the dock, the men within them begin to move with the ease of ritual, coiling ropes, lowering baskets, nudging each other with quiet remarks that carry no urgency, just the familiarity of shared work and long hours at sea. Nets lie coiled in the bottoms of the hulls, damp and tangled with seaweed, scales still glittering in patches, and wooden crates hold the weight of the day's labor. Fish of many sizes, bundled carefully and resting on beds of straw or woven reed mats, their bodies already stiffening with the early coolness of approaching night. Ingrid joins the others at the dock's edge, her expression calm but focused, her hands brushing her skirt clean as she prepares to help unload the catch. The dock creaks softly as feet step onto it, one boat at a time, and the baskets are lifted and passed upward with care, arms straining slightly under the familiar weight, eyes scanning the fish with the practiced gaze that instantly notes freshness, size, and any signs of damage or rot. There is no clamor, no shouting, only the steady rhythm of unloading, the soft splash of water against the shore, and the low hum of approval or observation as each crate is set down and checked. Behind the dock, carts wait in the shade, lined with cloth and straw, ready to carry the catch up the hill to the storage buildings where salt, smoke, and time will continue the work of preservation. The boats are not emptied entirely, for some will be turned around at first light and readied again, nets repaired, sails checked, oars tied. Because in a village like this, the rhythm of harvest from sea and land never truly pauses. Once the baskets are carried away and the boats tied securely for the night, the fishermen stretch their backs, roll their shoulders, and speak more freely now, greeting family, sharing bits of news from the water, recounting small challenges or oddities from the day's journey. One man lifts a glistening fish and shows it to the children gathered nearby, who gasp and point, eyes wide with delight as he explains its name and tells a half-serious tale of how it tried to leap from the net and back into the sea. The sun, now lower, casts a bronze glow across the scene, reflecting off the wet planks of the dock, the glimmering fish scales, and the hair of those gathered, turning everything into a soft, glowing tableau of work, reunion, and community. The tide pulls gently at the boats, rocking them like cradles as the wind stirs their empty sails, and a gull cries out once before diving sharply into the water, rising again moments later with a glinting prize in its beak. Ingrid helps lift the final crate, her hands steady despite the weight, her breath deep and slow. And as she turns to walk back toward the path leading uphill, she glances once more at the sea, so vast and constant, yet so intimately woven into their lives that it feels more like a neighbor than a force of nature. The boats remain, their silhouettes darkening in the fading light, waiting for night, for rest, and for the certainty of another morning. And you, dear listener, following the quiet flow of this day, may find yourself rocked gently by the rhythm of waves, the sway of boats, and the soft cadence of human effort shared with the sea. Let the soft light, the cool air, and the unbroken routine of return ease you deeper into rest, your breath sinking with the oars, your thoughts drifting like nets beneath calm water. Here, in the amber hush of evening, at the water's edge, there is no need to move, to wonder, or to speak, only to be still and to float quietly in the peace of a village that always finds its way home. As the last of the evening sun slips below the horizon and the sky transforms into a canvas of muted lavender and slate gray, streaked with the soft blush of fading gold, the Viking coastal village continues to hum with the steady, intentional rhythm of life, its work not halted by the sun's departure, but simply moving inward, toward hearths and firelight, toward tasks suited for hands warmed by flame, and minds calmed by the softness of dusk. Along the open-air clearing near the longhouses, several low fires are lit, their flames flickering gently in the encroaching dusk, casting warm orange halos that shimmer on the grass and dance across the faces of the villagers who now gather to perform one of the final, essential rituals of the day, the cleaning and gutting of the day's catch. Around each fire, flat stones serve as makeshift tables, their surfaces worn smooth by years of fish scales, blades, and careful hands, and wide wooden bowls rest beside them, half filled with seawater fetched from the nearby tide pools, now glimmering under the rising stars. Ingrid kneels beside one such fire, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, her hands steady as she takes up the first fish, its body cold but firm, eyes clear, flesh taut from hours spent in the cool boat hold. With practiced precision, she slips the blade along its belly, opening it with the same care a seamstress might use on delicate cloth, and the entrails slide out with a wet sound that barely rises above the ambient crackle of firewood or the gentle murmur of conversation among the other villagers nearby. She works without pause, her hands rinsing in the seawater bowl between each fish, wiping the blade on a cloth slung over her hip, her breath steady, her motions almost meditative, synchronized with the rise and fall of firelight shadows. Across from her, another young woman hums softly, her voice a thin, pleasant thread that winds its way between the tasks, not distracting but soothing, as natural to this work as the smell of salt and ash. A group of older boys sit farther down the line, their own knives flashing quickly as they compete to finish their crates, their laughter low but cheerful, tempered by the discipline taught to them over many seasons. The fish pile dwindles slowly, each one processed and passed along, its flesh destined for smoking, curing, or immediate use in the next day's meals. Bits of scale cling to fingertips and forearms, and the ground beneath them sparkles faintly where silvery fragments catch the light. The scent here is sharp but clean, fresh fish mingled with wood smoke, iron from the blade, and the faint herbal notes of the leaves thrown onto the fire to keep away insects. Above them, the first stars appear, winking into life one by one as the sky deepens in color and the moon begins its quiet ascent, casting its own pale glow over the rooftops and reflecting dimly in the pools left behind by the tide. The village itself quiets further as children are led indoors, their energy finally spent, their cheeks warm and eyes blinking slowly with the weight of sleep. Inside the longhouses, fires are being stoked for warmth, not cooking, and the low murmurs of bedtime stories or soft prayer drift through open windows, mingling with the more rhythmic sounds of scraping blades and shifting crates still taking place outside. Ingrid wipes her brow with the back of her hand, then looks up, her gaze resting for a moment on the horizon where the last band of light is swallowed by the sea. And then she returns to her work, not hurried, not weary, simply present as she always is in this hour, when the world grows softer and the senses sharper. She knows which fish will be smoked tomorrow, which will be salted and stored, which set aside for the healer who requested oil from the livers. Each decision is small, but not meaningless. Each movement builds toward the invisible scaffold of a life lived in rhythm with necessity, community, and the elements. As more fish are cleaned and sorted, the bowls are emptied and refilled, the cloths rinsed in buckets or replaced, and the younger villagers begin collecting the guts for composting, careful not to spill, respectful of the usefulness even in what is discarded. The fires grow lower, their embers pulsing more than flickering now, and the clearing is bathed in the warm glow of shared purpose, of a task nearly complete. When the last fish is gutted and set aside, Ingrid leans back on her heels, stretches her arms above her head, and allows herself a slow breath, not of exhaustion, but of completion. The others, too, pause, their faces relaxed, their movements slower now, filled with the quiet pride that comes at the close of something done with care. A pot of herbal tea is passed around, steaming gently, and its aroma, mint, chamomile, perhaps a hint of wild fennel, rises like a balm against the evening air, soothing the senses and preparing the body for rest. You, dear listener, who have followed this village through the gentle passage of the day, may find yourself wrapped now in the comfort of this final ritual, your thoughts settling like ash on cooling fire, your breath slowing in time with the fading crackle of embers and the stillness of hands grown still. Let the warmth of the hearth, the flicker of firelight, and the soft scrape of the last cleaned blade soothe you deeper into stillness. Here, beside the fire, with the sea behind and the stars above, you are part of a world that asks nothing of you but to rest, to listen, and to dream alongside those whose every motion sings the quiet song of peace, as full night drapes its velvet cloth across the Viking coastal village, and the final hues of twilight dissolve into deep, tranquil indigo. The homes nestled along the shoreline begin to glow softly from within, their windows casting flickers of orange and gold onto the surrounding earth, like warm lanterns placed gently along a darkened path. The air grows cooler now, tinged with the faint scent of salt and pine carried on the sea breeze, and the sky above gleams with a scattering of stars that blink into place one by one, their light ancient and steady, like distant candles guiding the village safely through another peaceful night. Inside Ingrid's longhouse, the hearth is now the heart of the home, its flames crackling low but strong, casting shifting shadows that move slowly across the timbered walls and woven floor mats, creating a sense of movement and life even in the stillness of evening. The family gathers close, seated on low benches and thick fur rugs arranged around the fire, their faces flushed with warmth, their eyes reflecting the flickering light. The air is filled with the comforting aroma of the evening meal. Fish stew simmered in a heavy iron pot with bits of dried herbs, barley, and wild greens gathered earlier from the hillside, its savory scent mingling with the smoky tang of the wood fire and the sweet notes of honeyed bread resting nearby on a flat stone platter. The meal is served without ceremony but with deep familiarity, bowls passed from hand to hand, wooden spoons dipped and shared, the rhythm of eating calm and communal, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of appreciation or the gentle clink of utensils against clay. Ingrid sips from her bowl slowly, savoring each bite, not just for its taste, but for what it represents, a culmination of labor, a reward for care, a thread in the quiet fabric of sustenance that ties each villager to the land, the sea, and each other. Around the hearth, conversation begins to unfurl, not loud or insistent, but soft, woven from memories and small reflections, the kind of talk that wraps itself around the listener like a woolen cloak. Her brother speaks of a bird he saw skimming the waves that morning, its wings so wide it seemed to float rather than fly. And her father chuckles quietly, recalling a story from his youth of being followed for hours by a curious seal on a foggy fishing trip. The elder of the household, seated on a carved wooden chair beside the fire, leans forward with a quiet groan, his voice low and gravelly as he begins to share a tale, not one of battle or gods, but of a time long past when a storm nearly swept away half the village, and how they rebuilt with nothing but driftwood, patience, and the shared will to survive. The children listen with wide eyes, their hands clutching pieces of bread, their mouths slightly open as the story settles into their minds like seeds dropped into fertile soil, certain to sprout and bloom in future retellings. The fire pops and settles, its light dimming slightly as the logs burn lower, but no one moves to add more just yet. The warmth is enough, the moment full. Outside, the wind rustles through the grass and trees, brushing against the longhouse like a lullaby, and the distant sound of waves meeting the shore returns as a steady backdrop to the indoor hush. Occasionally, the low howl of a dog echoes faintly across the village, answered by another farther off. But these sounds do not disturb. They reinforce the sense of enclosure, of being wrapped in something larger and older, where every sound is part of a known pattern. Ingrid finishes her meal and sets her bowl aside, her legs curled beneath her, her gaze softening as her mind begins to drift, not with thought, but with feeling. The warmth of her family close by, the satisfaction of a full stomach, the slow surrender of her muscles to the comfort of stillness. Others around the fire do the same, their heads leaning against walls or the shoulders of loved ones, their breaths deepening, their voices falling away. A few still murmur softly, continuing quiet conversations that may fade before finding an end, while others let silence take hold, a companion just as welcome as speech. The elder leans back, eyes half closed, a slight smile on his face as the fire reflects gently in his silver beard, and the youngest child begins to hum under her breath a slow, tuneless melody that drifts through the room like smoke, soft and meandering. Outside the longhouse, stars continue to thicken across the sky, their cold light contrasting with the warmth inside, yet serving the same purpose: illumination, orientation, continuity. The village sleeps soon, but for now, it rests awake in the half-dream of firelight and story, in the safe embrace of shared space and soft shadows. And you, dear listener, who have followed these rhythms and rituals from dawn until night, are now welcome to join this circle of comfort, to feel the hearth's glow in your bones, the story's hum in your chest, the slowing breath of rest wrapping around you like a fur blanket. Let the flicker of flame, the weight of calm, and the hush of a family, together in peace, guide you deeper into stillness. Here, beside the fire, in a home held together by hands and love and time, you are safe, you are welcome, and you are free to sleep as the village surrenders more fully to the hush of night, and the last of the hearth fires dim into glowing embers, casting only faint halos onto the wooden walls and resting faces within each longhouse. A quiet transition takes place beyond those walls, one not marked by fanfare or wakefulness, but by gentle movement, low voices, and the torchlight glow of responsibility passed from day to night. While most of the Viking coastal village rests in layers of furs and dreams, wrapped in the comfort of completed work and full bellies, a few rise quietly to take up the task of night watch, a sacred, silent ritual that honors both duty and peace. Along the edge of the sea, where the soft lull of waves meets rock and sand in an endless embrace, figures move through the dark with deliberate calm, their steps cushioned by moss and earth, their faces occasionally lit by the flicker of torches held low to avoid disrupting the vast stillness. Ingrid's eldest cousin, a man whose voice is seldom loud but always heard when it matters, walks a slow circuit around the outer perimeter of the village, his eyes lifted now and then toward the sky, which has grown deeper in its darkness and sharper in its stars. The constellations hang like embroidered silver on a cloak of infinite midnight, each one known to him not by name alone, but by stories passed from elders, by seasons remembered, and by the angle of the sea's horizon. When the first cold wind of winter begins to bite, the path he walks leads past the drying racks, now empty and silent, their long shadows stretched by moonlight into skeletal fingers across the ground, and then toward the storage houses, their thick walls sealed tightly with ropes and waxed cloth to guard the dried fish, herbs, and barley within. He pauses there briefly, checking the corners for signs of animal disturbance, brushing his hand along the cold stone wall as if offering a wordless blessing, then continues on. In the stillness, the sounds that remain are magnified and sacred: the creak of wood adjusting in the night's cool air, the distant hoot of an owl nesting in the hillside grove, the soft whistle of wind threading its way between longhouses and along the outer palisade. Somewhere behind him, near the northern edge of the village, another watchman, an older woman with a walking stick, wrapped in carved runes, makes her own rounds, stopping every so often to tap her stick gently on the earth, a rhythmic signal passed through generations, not as a warning, but as a gentle assurance. I am here. I am watching. You are safe. The two of them never meet during their rounds, nor do they need to. Their paths interlace like the weave of a basket, overlapping enough to cover every entrance, every angle, every shadowed corner, where trouble might once have hidden long ago, though no real threat has brushed the village in many seasons. Still, the ritual persists, because peace, like fire, must be tended. At the crest of the hill, where the watchtower stands, little more than a raised platform with a wide view of sea and sky, the cousin climbs the short ladder and settles into the lookout seat, adjusting his cloak against the wind that rolls in off the dark waters. Below him, the village rests in perfect stillness, its longhouses nestled like sleeping animals, curved and low, their roofs glinting faintly under the moonlight. From this height, he can also see the boats tethered in the small harbor, their wooden frames rising and falling gently with the movement of the tide, creaking occasionally like old bones settling into sleep. He reaches into his cloak and pulls out a small carved talisman, shaped like a whale's tooth, smooth from years of handling, and rubs it between his fingers as he listens to the night, not for threat, but for reassurance. The breathing of the sea, the sigh of the wind, the slow drift of clouds across the stars. His breath fogs in the air, pale and thin, and he watches it disappear as he leans back and lets the silence enfold him completely. Time passes slowly here, not with urgency, but with dignity. Minutes feel like hours, hours like moments, as the weight of night presses gently upon the earth and all things within it. In the village below, children turn in their sleep, furs rustle with the shifting of limbs, and the coals of hearths pulse with a red-orange glow, each one a tiny heartbeat in the vast darkness. Owls call again, farther away now, and the sound of small waves kissing the rocks grows softer as the tide begins to turn. The cousin, still seated in the watchtower, begins to hum under his breath, a low, steady tune that carries no melody, just a vibration of memory and habit, a lullaby not for others, but for himself, to tether his mind gently to the moment and to the long lineage of watchers before him who have sung the same song to the same stars. And you, dear listener, cradled now in the quiet rhythm of this night, may find your own thoughts fading, your breath deepening, your body growing heavier with calm. Let the soft sounds of this eternal watch, the whisper of waves, the sigh of trees, the hum of a keeper's breath, guide you further into rest. Here, beneath the stars, under the care of steady hands and silent footsteps, you are held by something ancient and gentle. There is no need to watch, to wonder, or to move. The night has you, the stars see you, and in this village, where peace is a promise kept in every footstep, you are safe to sleep as the Viking coastal village slips deeper into the embrace of midnight, with every household resting under thick thatch and layered furs. The world outside continues its quiet motion, not in haste or noise, but in the steady unfolding of natural rhythms that do not pause for sleep. The moon, now high and luminous in the ink-black sky, casts a silver-blue light over the shoreline, painting the rocks, the driftwood, and the gently swaying grasses in a cool, dreamlike glow that seems to hush even the wind itself. The waves roll in softly, their white crests luminous under the moonlight, as they fold onto the shore with a patient sigh, then withdraw, leaving behind ribbons of wet sand that glimmer like polished glass. It is in this silent, sacred hour that Ingrid, drawn by something quieter than thought, finds herself stepping barefoot out of the longhouse and walking slowly toward the water's edge, her woolen shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders, her hair unbraided and trailing behind her like a soft shadow. She does not come for reason or task, but for stillness, for that particular kind of peace that comes only when the earth is at its most silent and the stars most awake. Her footsteps make no sound against the damp ground, and the only thing that follows her is her reflection in the puddles left behind by the receding tide, a wavering twin lit by starlight and softened by ripples as she reaches the narrow stretch where sea meets stone. She pauses and exhales, letting the cool, salt air fill her lungs, and then drift away again, carrying with it the weight of a long day's labor and the gentle ache of memory. Around her, the world seems to listen, the dunes frozen in mid-breath, the grasses stilled, the sea waiting. She lowers herself to sit on a smooth, flat rock, her toes brushing the edge of the water, and she gazes out toward the dark horizon, where sea and sky blend into one unbroken canvas. The moon's reflection dances on the surface of the sea, stretching toward her like a luminous path, and she lets her eyes follow its shimmer, her thoughts unwinding with it like thread from a spindle. Somewhere far to her right, a lone gull cries into the night, its voice echoing briefly before being swallowed by the open air. And further still, the soft thud of waves against the moored boats reminds her that even in sleep, the village breathes with her. She picks up a small, sea-smoothed stone and rolls it in her hand, its surface cool and familiar. And for a moment, her mind floats away, not into memory, but into feeling, into the slow current of now, where nothing must be done and everything simply is. Behind her, the village is a series of quiet shapes, longhouses resting under the watchful gaze of stars, smokehouses and storage sheds blending into the shadowed land, the fire pits cold and ringed with stones that still remember heat. She does not need to see it to know it is safe, whole, complete. The night watch continues its rounds, invisible from her perch, but present, just as the tides continue to shift and the stars continue to move overhead with their millennia-old rhythm. A breeze stirs her shawl, wrapping it more tightly around her shoulders, and she smiles faintly, not from joy or sadness, but from a soft awareness that she is part of this night, not separate from it. This village, this sea, this hour, they are not hers to command or possess, but to join, to breathe with, to be held by. She leans back on her hands and tilts her head toward the sky. The constellations above, clear and sharp, each one a familiar pattern, whose story she learned as a child and has retold in whispers by firelight. They shine down now, not as mysteries, but as companions, old and eternal, guiding sailors, blessing harvests, and offering comfort to those who walk alone at night. Ingrid closes her eyes for a moment and listens, not for words, but for the music of stillness, the rustle of reeds behind her, the occasional drop of water from a wave breaking against stone, the nearly imperceptible hush of the moon moving across the sky. These are the lullabies of her world, not sung, not written, but deeply known, etched into the bones of the land and the hearts of its people. Time moves differently here, measured not by clocks or urgency, but by breath, by moonrise, by the return of the tide. When she finally stands, the cold has begun to reach her feet, and the stones beneath her feel firmer now, the hour deeper. She walks back with the same quiet steps, her mind not racing with plans or memories, but resting gently in the calm certainty of belonging. Behind her, the sea continues its quiet conversation with the shore, and the moon keeps its watch overhead, and the village sleeps on, undisturbed. And you, dear listener, as you travel alongside this moment in the mind's eye, may find that your own breath has slowed, your thoughts softened, your body heavier with calm. Let the moonlight on the water, the hush of waves, and the cool silence of the midnight shore carry you deeper into rest. Here, where the world moves without hurry, and even the stars seem to exhale, you are safe, you are stilled, and you are welcome to sleep beneath the gaze of sky and sea. As the moon begins its slow descent beyond the hills, and the deep navy sky fades imperceptibly into softer shades of pre-dawn gray, the Viking coastal village remains wrapped in a hushed, velvety silence, and within the longhouse walls, that stillness deepens into a quiet so complete it feels sacred, like a woven tapestry of breath, warmth, and dreams hanging in the air. Inside Ingrid's longhouse, the fire has long since burned low, reduced now to a nest of red glowing embers that pulse gently in the center hearth, like the beating heart of the home, casting faint flickers of light across the thick beams above, and the sleeping figures sprawled in furs below. The room is heavy with the scent of smoke that lingers in the timbers, mingled with the earthy aroma of wool blankets, salted wood, dried herbs hung in bunches from the rafters, and the soft musk of resting bodies, all mixed into a soothing perfume that speaks not of labor, but of life held in pause. A quiet creak marks the slow settling of the house, wood stretching and shifting under the weight of the night's coolness, while every now and then the furs rustle softly as someone rolls onto their side or adjusts their cloak in sleep. The occasional murmur escapes from a dreaming mouth, half-formed words, fragments of stories still unfolding behind closed eyes, followed by the breathy sigh of a child curling closer into the arms of an older sibling, unaware of anything but this nearness of familiar warmth. Near the far wall, Ingrid lies still beneath a layered pile of thick pelts, her breathing deep and even, one hand resting gently against her chest, her other curled near her cheek, fingers barely touching the coarse fabric of the woven mat below. Her face is calm, slack with sleep, her hair loose, and fanned around her like a shadowy halo, catching the faint glow from the coals and strands of burnished gold. The rhythm of her breath matches the quiet waves, audible just beyond the walls, a natural harmony between human rest and the sea's eternal lullaby. Across the longhouse, a dog sleeps near the hearth, limbs twitching slightly in its dreams, ears occasionally flicking as if chasing some remembered sound, its presence both guardian and comfort, its shape just visible in the low light. A pair of boots stands near the doorway, dusted faintly with sand, and beside them, a coiled fishing net rests where it was placed after the day's work, as if even the tools of the trade have laid themselves to rest for the night. In one corner, a small clay pot simmers gently on the edge of a warming stone, forgotten in the flow of slumber, but still exhaling faint steam into the air, scented with wild mint and dried berries. A tonic left unfinished, its sweetness lingering like memory. Above, the rafters hold the silhouettes of drying herbs and fish skins, swaying gently with the draft from a narrow smoke hole in the ceiling, through which the stars still peek, winking softly like watchful eyes. Time does not move here as it does elsewhere. It drips slowly, like water from a thawing eve, barely noticed, barely heard, counted only in the soft rise and fall of chests under blankets, in the still heat of the coals, and in the whisper of the breeze brushing faintly against the wall, where the cracks between planks let in the faintest sounds of the sleeping village outside. There is no sense of worry here, no need for thought or anticipation, only a gentle surrender to this cocoon of night, where even the past and future seem to step back in deference to the simplicity of now. The longhouse, filled with its resting souls, holds an ancient sort of peace, the kind that comes from generations of shared labor, laughter, grief, and love, layered into the very bones of the walls and floor. It is a vessel, cradling life and memory and rest, sealed in warmth and shadow, in silence and breath, silence and breath. And you, dear listener, as you walk quietly through this resting place with your imagination's careful step, may feel yourself soothed by the quiet gravity of it all. Let your own breath slow to match that of the sleepers here. Let your thoughts fold themselves like furs across the floor. Let the warmth of shared silence wrap around your shoulders like a cloak passed from friend to friend. You need not move or worry or speak, only drift, only rest, only listen to the gentle hush of life at peace. Here, within these ancient wooden walls, where the fire glows low and dreams run deep, you are safe, you are still, and you are free to sleep until morning, as the hours stretch gently through the middle of the night, and the sky above the Viking coastal village turns from ink black to a velvety charcoal, flecked with pinpricks of silver light. The world outside the longhouses remains a realm of silence and soft movement, where time passes not with noise or urgency, but with the rhythm of breeze, moonlight, and the delicate hush of a community deep in slumber. The wind, which had been still and obedient earlier in the evening, begins to stir again, curling in from the sea with a breath of cool air that brushes over the thatched rooftops, glides through the cracks in the shutters, and whispers along the grassy paths like an unseen visitor returning from some distant place. It carries with it the scent of salt and seaweed, of distant kelp beds and damp stones, warmed earlier by the sun, now cooling under the gaze of stars. The gusts are gentle, never violent, more like a lullaby than a warning, moving between houses like a thoughtful hand smoothing rumpled blankets. And with it, the sleeping village breathes in unison, its stillness made all the more poignant by the sounds that remain. The occasional creak of timber as walls shift in the temperature drop, the soft hoot of an owl circling above the treetops near the boundary wall, and the slow, steady rustle of reeds swaying at the edge of the beach. A lone torch, forgotten or left deliberately at the gatepost, burns low, its flame fluttering with every breeze, casting long, thin shadows that stretch and contract across the ground like a flickering dream. By the shore, the boats moored earlier now rock almost imperceptibly with the movement of the tide, their ropes groaning softly, their hulls pressing rhythmically against the dock's wooden posts, a sound so familiar and constant it blends with the heartbeat of the night itself. Driftwood, washed ashore and scattered across the pebbles, shifts with the gusts, clicking gently against one another like pieces of an ancient puzzle, rearranging in the dark. Along the western edge of the village, where a row of small storage huts sits in tidy succession, their doors firmly secured, a loose strip of cloth, once tied to signal a finished bundle of dried herbs, flutters faintly in the breeze, its whispering motion like a wordless chant, barely louder than the wind in the grass. Near the central fire pit, now cold and blanketed in ash, a cluster of stones remains warm to the touch, holding the memory of flame even as the night wraps them in shadow. Occasionally, an ember glows beneath the layer of gray, only to dim again, a pulse of warmth that flickers like the memory of a story just told. Inside the longhouses, the breeze finds its way through roof thatch and under door gaps, dancing over sleeping faces, curling through braids and beards, tugging gently at the corners of woolen blankets. It cools the air without disturbing it, freshening the spaces heavy with breath and quiet, and in doing so, it becomes part of the dreamscape, an invisible hand threading through the unconscious minds of the villagers, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the subtle rustle of leaves. The dogs stir only slightly, noses twitching in their sleep, paws kicking gently as if chasing something half-remembered in a dream. The night watch, still alert, but now accustomed to the quiet repetition of the late hours, walks a slower path, boots pressing softly into the earth, eyes lifted only now and then to scan the surroundings, more often simply observing the sky or listening to the trees. Even they are moved to hush, to stillness, by the softness of the wind and the serene certainty that all is well. From the treetops, beyond the last row of huts, the branches sway slowly in a rhythm known only to the night itself, their leaves rustling not like a song, but like a breath exhaled after a long day's labor. And above, the stars stretch on endlessly, each one suspended like a droplet of light in the vast, embracing darkness. The moon, now beginning its descent toward the far hills, casts a longer light over the sleeping village, illuminating roofs and ridgelines, tools left outside, and the curve of the stone wall that hugs the inland edge. Everything it touches becomes part of a sacred stillness, a tableau of peace, a portrait of rest. And you, dear listener, who move quietly through this sleeping world in thought or in heart, may feel this breeze too. Feel it curl around your shoulders, through your hair, across your brow, not to wake you, but to comfort you, to remind you that night itself is a presence, watchful and kind. Let it cool your thoughts, hush your worries, and settle you deeper into the fold of rest. Here, in this village, where the wind speaks gently and the stars stand sentinel, you are safe beneath the sky. The world breathes with you. The sea sings you soft lullabies, and the breeze tells stories only the heart can hear. Let go, drift now, and sleep as the depth of night begins to loosen its grip, and the sky transitions from pitch black to the faintest suggestion of blue along the eastern horizon. A quiet but undeniable shift takes place across the Viking coastal village, a transformation so subtle that only the earth and those who know it intimately could perceive it. The stars begin to fade, not abruptly, but with a gradual retreat, as though respectfully stepping back to make space for what comes next, while the moon, now low and pale, drifts toward the ridgeline with the calm dignity of a guardian who has completed their watch. The air, once cold and heavy with night, begins to stir with a gentler breath, cool, yes, but somehow lighter, carrying with it a barely perceptible freshness that hints at renewal. The sea continues its eternal motion, its waves arriving in soft procession against the shore. But the tone of the water has changed ever so slightly. It speaks now not in whispers of sleep, but in murmurs of awakening, as if the tide itself knows that day is approaching. Along the beach, the first gull cries echo faintly, their voices high and clean, cutting through the silence like threads of light across fabric. Up near the edge of the village, where the forest's dark boundary gives way to wild grasses and the occasional low-growing elderbush, the birds begin their hesitant chorus, not in full voice, but in singular notes, spaced far apart, testing the stillness, like a child knocking gently on a sleeping door. In the longhouse, the deep rhythms of slumber continue, but they begin to change too. One child stirs and turns over beneath his woolen blanket, pulling it tighter against his chest as his body registers the cooling air. And a woman near the hearth, Ingrid's aunt, opens her eyes without alarm, not roused by any sound, but awakened by an instinct passed through generations, the inner clock of one whose life is measured not by the sun's glare or the clanging of bells, but by the subtle cues of wind, breath, and silence lifting. She does not move yet, she simply lies still, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, beams above, watching the shadows shift slightly as the fire's final embers lose their glow. Outside, the mist begins to form along the low areas near the shore and between the uneven paths that wind through the village. It curls slowly from the grass and sand like smoke rising from hidden springs. coiling around wooden posts and stone piles, softening the sharp edges of the world into something dreamlike and pale. The thatched roofs become silhouettes in this growing haze, their outlines blurry, their chimneys dark against the dimming stars. Ingrid, still asleep, stirs only once, her breath catching softly before returning to its slow, even pace, her brow smooth and her body relaxed beneath the layered pelts that insulate her from the chill. The silence inside the longhouse now carries a new weight, no longer the silence of deep night, but the heavy quiet that always precedes the first stirrings of purpose, the moment when the body prepares to rise, even if the mind has not yet noticed. A pot near the fire gives a quiet pop as the last trapped bubble of air escapes its cooling surface. Farther from the hearth, the dogs begin to twitch, ears flicking forward and then back, nostrils widening to catch the scent of a new morning drifting in through the doorframe. The world is not yet awake, but it is thinking about waking. One or two shadows move across the upper sky. Large seabirds flying higher than usual, scouting the early currents, their long wings slicing the thinning darkness like quiet knives. The hillside across the bay, visible now only in outline, begins to reveal a thin gold edge along its peak, the very first evidence of the sun stretching upward behind it. The village itself seems to lean toward that light, like a field of sleeping flowers preparing to turn. And you, dear listener, wandering this liminal hour between night and day, may feel this transition not as a call to rise, but as an invitation to sink deeper into peace. Let this moment hold you still, the wind not yet stirred, the sun not yet seen, the people not yet moving. It is a pause, a breath between the last dreams of night and the first thoughts of morning. Rest within it. There is no rush. The world is not yet asking anything of you, anything of you. Let the mist wrap around your thoughts, the early hush slow your pulse, and the gentle knowing that life will begin again, but not yet, be a comfort. Here, in this space where dawn is only a whisper, and night still lingers like a lullaby, you are safe, you are still, and you are welcome to sleep as the delicate light of dawn brushes more boldly against the edges of the Viking coastal village, spilling soft hues of gray-blue and pale amber across rooftops still damp with dew. The once dormant world begins to exhale the long-held breath of night, awakening not with sudden movement, but with the gentlest rustling of life returning. Inside the longhouse, the embers in the hearth, which had slept beneath a crust of pale ash, begin to glow anew as Ingrid's aunt kneels beside the pit, her hands moving with practiced grace as she stirs them carefully, coaxing life back into the fire with a whisper of breath and a handful of dry twigs. The sound of a snapping kindling is almost musical, a soft crackle that breaks the silence like a warm greeting. A small flame blooms, flickering low at first, then climbing with purpose, casting golden light across the sleeping faces still wrapped in fur and linen. Shadows flicker on the walls, stretching and shrinking as the fire grows, painting the timbers with motion and bringing depth to every carved beam and woven mat. The scent of wood smoke begins to drift upward, mingling with the faint aroma of dried herbs hanging overhead, and the first true warmth of day enters the space, not from the sun, but from the hearth, the ancient heart of every home. One by one, members of the household begin to stir, their movements slow, unhurried, guided more by rhythm than thought. A child rolls over with a small grunt, rubbing sleep from her eyes and blinking at the dancing firelight as if unsure whether the flames are part of her dream or a new beginning. Ingrid opens her eyes, not suddenly, but gradually, her lashes fluttering against her cheek before she stretches beneath the pelts, her arms rising and falling with the fluidity of someone rooted deeply in rest. The air is still cool, but no longer heavy. It carries with it a quiet promise, a sense of readiness, as if the very walls of the longhouse know that another day has begun its soft unfolding. Outside, the sounds begin to layer upon one another. First, the creaking of the longhouse door as it opens with a push from Ingrid's uncle, who steps into the yard to assess the morning sky. He stretches, spine cracking faintly, his eyes narrowed against the growing brightness as he inhales deeply, filling his chest with the scent of sea air and smoke. A gull calls from overhead, louder now, its cry sharp and clear as it circles above the beach, where the tide has retreated to leave behind pools, reflecting the fresh sky. Other homes begin to wake as well. Distant murmurs of conversation, the scrape of pots, the flap of rugs shaken out into the breeze. Smoke begins to rise from several chimneys, thin trails curling into the soft morning, like fingers pointing upward toward the light. Ingrid sits up and draws a wool shawl around her shoulders, her bare feet brushing the woven floor as she makes her way to the hearth and accepts a warm mug from her aunt, herbal tea brewed from mint, yarrow, and a touch of dried fruit. Its aroma gentle, almost sleepy. They do not speak, but share a small smile, a nod, an unspoken agreement that there is comfort in silence. Around them, life gathers its momentum slowly, the thud of boots pulled on, the soft brushing of hair, the muted clang of a water jug being filled. A boy begins to feed the chickens in the yard, scattering grain in wide arcs that catch the morning light like falling gold. The chickens cluck and peck eagerly, their movements erratic and eager, in contrast to the stillness of the humans, just now regaining motion. Ingrid steps outside a few minutes later, her eyes squinting against the new light, and takes a slow breath as she looks toward the sea, which glimmers now in full color, blue-gray with streaks of silver, gentle waves rolling in like sighs. The boats are still moored, but no longer still. They rock with the morning current, their ropes taut and swaying slightly. The smell of salt and fish is stronger now, made sharper by the warming sun and the movement of people along the shoreline, preparing the racks and tools for another day of work. The world is fully in motion once more, but gently, reverently, as though the entire village agrees that to rush would be to disrespect the quiet grace of night's ending. And you, dear listener, standing at this threshold between stillness and purpose, may find yourself nestled in this moment of transition, not pushed to rise, but invited to remain still a little longer, to savor the soft unfolding of day. Let the stirring of embers, the hush of footsteps, the first songs of birds, and the scent of firewood and tea wrap around you like a shawl, soothing and warm. Let the gentle awakening of this village become your own. Slow, quiet, safe. Here, in the half-light, where breath and motion return not with haste, but with care, you are welcome to rest a little more, to listen, to feel the world beginning again around you, and to know that even in movement there is peace. Sleep need not end all at once. Let it drift, like smoke rising from the hearth, slow and soft into the morning air. As the morning sun continues its delicate ascent above the hills beyond the Viking coastal village, its rays cascade in the long, golden beams that filter through the trees and stretch across the dew-laden grass, giving the waking earth a warm, radiant blush that catches on every leaf, stone, and patch of moss like scattered gold dust. The air is still cool and crisp, filled with the fresh scent of damp wood, early blossom, and the faint, salty undertone carried from the distant sea, mingling into a fragrance that belongs entirely to morning and nowhere else. Just beyond the edge of the village, where the worn footpath splits away from the main houses and dips gently toward a meandering stream bordered by thick tufts of grass and willow branches, Ingrid walks slowly with a carved wooden bucket in one hand and a folded cloth tucked neatly under her arm. Her steps are careful, steady, the soles of her leather boots brushing aside fallen leaves and dislodging beads of dew from low-hanging stems that glisten in the morning light like strings of tiny pearls. The stream, visible now through a small clearing between two ancient oaks, babbles gently over smooth stones, its surface clear and lively, reflecting the pale sky in shimmering ripples broken occasionally by a drifting petal or a curious insect. Ingrid kneels on a flat rock at the water's edge, lowering her bucket with a practiced tilt that avoids stirring the silt below, the wood groaning faintly as it fills with the cold, glassy water. She watches the ripples spread outward, the sun catching on their crests and throwing light back onto her face and arms, creating a dance of reflections that flicker gently with the stream's motion. All around her, the world breathes in quiet unity, the rustle of leaves above her head as the breeze picks up slightly, the far-off cluck of hens already foraging in the yard, the muffled clanging of tools being arranged by villagers, preparing the fish racks and storage lines for the day's work. Yet here, at the stream's edge, it all seems softened, like distant music, background to the rhythm of her own careful movements. She dips the cloth into the stream and wrings it out slowly, then uses it to wipe down the edges of the bucket, removing stray leaves or dust. The ritual, not just practical, but meditative, an act performed countless times, yet always with a touch of reverence. The cold water soaks her fingers and trips along her wrists, sending a sharp but refreshing tingle up her arms, a sensation that brings her even more deeply into the present moment. Nearby, a pair of birds flits from one low branch to another, chirping in bursts that echo faintly against the stream bed, their feathers puffed up against the morning chill. A squirrel, startled by a shifting breeze or a falling leaf, darts across the rocks and disappears into the underbrush with a flick of its tail, adding a fleeting sense of movement to the otherwise unhurried scene. Ingrid rises slowly, her knees cracking faintly, the full bucket cradled in both hands now, heavy but familiar in its weight, balanced against her hip with the ease of long practice. She begins the short walk back up the path, her eyes lingering briefly on the way the sunlight falls across the water, turning it into molten silver streaked with pale blue. As she ascends the gentle slope toward the village, the landscape opens up before her, the longhouses emerging once more in full view, smoke trailing lazily from their chimneys, children running barefoot in the grass chasing a barking dog, and the rhythmic sound of wooden poles being planted into the earth by two men securing the drying lines. There is no urgency, only rhythm, only return. She passes by a neighbor, an older woman with braided gray hair and a thick wool cloak, who nods in greeting without a word, her hands busy with sorting herbs into bundles beneath a tree. Ingrid smiles and nods back, their silent exchange one of deep familiarity and shared time. The bucket sloshes gently with each step, droplets of water escaping over the rim and darkening the dry earth in small, irregular patches that will vanish with the sun's continued rise. The air warms slightly as she nears her home, and the doorway of the longhouse greets her like a friend, open now, with a warm glow spilling outward, carrying with it the comforting aroma of baking barley cakes and simmering morning stew. She steps inside and sets the bucket near the hearth with a satisfying thump. The water inside trembling briefly before settling again into stillness, into stillness. A child peeks around the corner, eyes wide and curious, and she tousles their hair gently before moving to pour a ladleful of the water into the small pot by the fire. The warmth of the space wraps around her like a cloak, the chatter of voices building gently as more family members rise and gather near the hearth. The day has begun, not with clamor or haste, but with small meaningful actions layered like threads in a tapestry, each one part of the whole. And you, dear listener, may find yourself carried along with this gentle morning current, your own breath deepening with the flow of the stream, your thoughts quieted by the simplicity of movement, of care, of rhythm. Let this scene remain with you, cool water in your hands, soft grass beneath your feet, sunlight flickering through the leaves. As you slip into deeper rest, the day may be rising, but for now, you're invited to linger in the quiet that comes before purpose. Let the peace of the stream, the light of early dawn, and the hush of the waking world guide you gently toward sleep once more. As the early morning settles into full bloom and sunlight stretches more confidently across the Viking coastal village, painting the world with a warm golden hue that glints on every drop of dew and blade of grass, the routine of the day begins to take on form and rhythm, each task emerging with the calm assurance of centuries-old tradition. Just beyond the longhouses, near the carefully stacked rows of drying racks that stand like wooden sentinels along the shore, the smoking pit comes alive, not abruptly, but with quiet deliberation, its awakening guided by practiced hands and a deep understanding of fire, wind, and time. Ingrid's older brother, Leif, arrives first, stepping softly across the damp ground with a bundle of dried driftwood cradled in his arms, his boots leaving dark impressions in the sand that are quickly softened by the morning breeze. The fire pit itself is wide and low, ringed with carefully selected stones darkened from years of use, its base layered with yesterday's ash, still faintly warm, a whisper of yesterday's labor lingering beneath the surface. He kneels beside it without a word, his movements efficient but unhurried, placing the driftwood in a careful pile, then reaching for the coiled flax rope and the iron striker resting nearby on a flat stone. Sparks fly with the third strike, and the flax catches with a quiet sizzle, curling into smoke before giving way to the first small flame. The fire is not meant to burn brightly, but to smolder, controlled, steady, patient, so he layers the driftwood sparingly, creating channels for the smoke to rise thick and slow. The scent begins to spread almost instantly, a deep, earthy mixture of burning wood, old salt, and seaweed, sharp at the edges but softened by familiarity, as comforting to the village as the scent of bread rising or wool drying in the sun. Ingrid arrives shortly after, carrying a clay bowl of soaked birch bark and dried sea herbs, her face still tinged with the sleepiness of early rising. Though her hands move with practiced focus, she sets the bowl down beside her brother, then kneels opposite him, adding a few pieces of bark to the low flame, which crackles and darkens as the herbs begin to smoke, their tendrils swirling upward in fragrant spirals. Together, they adjust. The angle of the windbreaks, large curved panels of woven reeds and whalebone positioned to keep gusts from disturbing the fire's delicate balance. Around them, the village continues its gentle hum, children laughing from somewhere behind the longhouses, hens clucking as they scavenge near the gardens, the rhythmic thump of a wooden mallet from a nearby blacksmith's shelter. But here at the smoking pit, time seems to slow, the world narrowing into the intimate choreography of smoke and care. Leif lifts the first tray of cleaned fish from a nearby rack, the skins glistening with brine, their silvery scales catching, the light before disappearing into the deepening cloud of smoke. He hooks each fish carefully on thin iron rods that span the length of the smoking pit, his hands steady, respectful, placing each one with the same gentle precision used by their grandfather and his grandfather before him. Ingrid tends the smoke, adjusting the bark, brushing embers with a stick to guide the flow, her eyes occasionally drifting upward to follow the smoke as it twists and blends into the morning sky. The smell intensifies, a rich, oily fragrance, now tinged with sweetness and salt, and soon the air near the pit is dense with it, settling onto clothes, into hair, into the pores of the village itself. Others join them gradually, a cousin with a new rack of trout, a neighbor with eel strung on loops of willow, their greetings low and murmured, their movements adding seamlessly to the rhythm already in place. No words are needed to assign roles or explained process. It is all known, passed down, not in speech, but in repetition, in the way hands move and eyes meet, in the shared silence that speaks of pride, memory, and continuity. As the smoke thickens and the fire settles into its ideal rhythm, the fish begin their slow transformation, not cooked, but preserved, their flesh tightening, their color deepening, their scent anchoring itself in the very heart of the morning. The sky overhead shifts from gold to blue, the last clouds of dawn drifting inland, while gulls circle above, drawn by scent, but kept at bay by fluttering cloth strips, and the ever-watchful dog that lounges near the woodpile. Ingrid rises briefly to stretch, brushing soot from her hands, and glances toward the sea, its surface now sparkling with mid-morning light. The boats are beginning to push off from shore, sails catching wind, men calling softly as they prepare for another day on the water. Behind her, the smoke continues to rise, steady and sure, like a thread tying earth to sky. And you, dear listener, drawn into this quiet rite by the softness of the fire and the slow dance of labor, may find your own breath matching the rhythm of the smoke, your thoughts drifting like mist above the coals. Let this moment anchor you. Warmth without heat, motion without urgency, purpose without pressure. Let the scent of driftwood and salt linger in your mind. The glow of the embers flicker behind your eyes. Here, beside the smoking pit under a rising sun, you are part of something ancient and unbroken. Let that knowing cradle you, still you, and lull you into rest once more. As the Viking coastal village continues to stretch into the fullness of morning, the sun now high enough to bathe the world in a soft, golden light that filters through the rising smoke of hearths and the sweet scent of salted air. A quiet labor begins again at the edge of the shoreline, where the sand is dry, and the wind brushes lightly inland from the sea. The net weavers, a group composed mostly of older women and youths just learning the rhythm of the work, have gathered near the rounded stones that mark the outer boundary of the drying field, their hands already busy in the soft, repetitive dance of creating the day's fishing nets from long spools of flaxen cord, their movements synchronized not by design, but by generations of embedded memory. Ingrid sits among them this morning, her legs crossed, her skirt gathered in neat folds across her knees to avoid the damp earth, a narrow shuttle in her hand, and a strand of cord looped expertly between her fingers, moving with a patient grace that comes only from having watched this work performed since childhood. Around her, the sound of net weaving blends seamlessly into the natural rhythm of the coastal world, the whisper of the ocean lapping at the rocky edge of the tide line, the faint creak of boats bobbing in their moorings, the distant laughter of children playing near the shallows, and the high keening cry of seabirds wheeling against the sky. The cord, a pale golden color in the sunlight, feels rough and familiar in her fingers, strengthened by days of soaking and twisting, now drying into supple strands that stretch between the rows of wooden stakes set into the ground like teeth in the earth. Each knot is tied with precision, loop, twist, pull, tighten, and then repeated, a soothing rhythm that calms the mind and stills the breath, drawing the weavers deeper into the collective task, like voices joining in a wordless hymn. From time to time, one of the older women leans forward to correct a new learner's mistake, or to demonstrate the shaping of a corner loop, their instructions low and kind, their fingers steady as stone. A pot of warm herb water rests nearby on a flat rock, steaming faintly, offering sips between stretches of work, its minty aroma lifting gently into the air and mixing with the earthy scent of dried rope, damp wood, and the faint salt of the nearby sea. As the morning lengthens, the sun warms the tops of their heads and casts long shadows across the sand, creating a lacework of light and fiber that mirrors the patterns they weave. Ingrid glances up occasionally to take in the view, the distant blue of the horizon, broken only by a few returning boats. Sails slack now as the wind eases, and the figures of the villagers farther up the shore, turning fish or adjusting drying racks, their movements like small pieces of a slow-moving tapestry being rethreaded each day. The weavers do not rush. Speed is never the goal. Durability, strength, balance, these are the qualities prized in the work, and so every knot carries intention, every pull is made with care, every pause honored without guilt. The quiet between voices is not empty but full, rich with presence and understanding, the kind of silence born of trust and time. A young boy near Ingrid fumbles with his loop, and she reaches over wordlessly, guiding his fingers, their hands briefly touching in a silent transmission of skill. The boy grins and tries again, and this time the knot holds, the knot holds. A breeze picks up and flutters the drying net behind them like a banner, its fine mesh shimmering as it catches the light, a visible record of shared hands and morning hours. Birds land nearby, pecking at sand fleas and bits of seaweed, their movements unconcerned with the human activity unfolding around them. The tide has turned now, slipping back toward the horizon, leaving behind shallow pools where the sky reflects itself in miniature, and tiny crabs scuttle for cover beneath shells and reeds. One of the older women hums softly, a tune older than words, and for a few moments, several others pick up the melody, not loudly, not with performance, but as if recalling a song remembered only in the fingers. The nets grow longer, heavier, spreading in careful lines across the sand, a testament to the hands that shape them and the waters they will meet. And you, dear listener, invited to sit quietly among these weavers, may find yourself wrapped in the same gentle calm, your own breath slowing with the knots, your thoughts softening with the breeze. Let the stillness of the shore, the texture of the cord, the quiet community of creation carry you into deeper ease. Here, beneath the watchful sky and beside the ever-patient sea, the work is never rushed, and neither are you. There is peace in repetition, in quiet purpose, in the knowing that what is woven today will hold fast tomorrow. Let that knowing settle around you like a net laid over the heart, not to trap, but to comfort, to hold, to still. You are safe here. You are welcome, and you are free to rest as the sun reaches its peak and casts a soft, golden glow directly overhead. The Viking coastal village eases into the slower rhythm of midday, the once active shoreline now humming with a quieter, more deliberate energy as families and workers pause to gather, rest, and share a meal together beneath the shade of the great elder tree that anchors the village's central clearing. The tree, with its wide canopy of pale green leaves rustling gently in the breeze, provides a sheltering presence above the smooth, flat stones and worn wooden benches that encircle its trunk like petals around a flower's heart. Sunlight filters through the branches in fragmented rays, dappling the ground in shifting patches of light and shadow that dance across the resting bodies of villagers reclining with their backs to the tree, their legs stretched lazily across the grass. A long wooden board, balanced carefully atop two tree stumps, serves as a communal table, and upon it sit an assortment of bowls and platters made of clay and carved wood, each brimming with the midday fare, steamed barley, smoked fish wrapped in herbs, boiled turnips, pickled root vegetables, and thick slices of bread, still warm from the morning bake. The smell rises in rich, earthy waves, yeasty, sharp, and salty, mingling with the soft aroma of crushed grass, the faint sweetness of a sap dripping slowly from the elder tree's bark, and the distant tang of the sea still clinging to the air. Ingrid sits cross-legged near the base of the tree, her hair braided and tucked back beneath a linen scarf, her hands wrapped around a deep wooden bowl filled with fish stew, the broth rich and flecked with wild garlic and juniper. Beside her, Leif tears a piece of bread in half and dips it into his own bowl with a low murmur of satisfaction, the steam curling around his face as he eats. Across from them, a group of children giggles over a pile of flat stones and driftwood, building miniature boats and pushing them across the grass as if launching them into imaginary seas. Their play, a mirror of the adults' work, but softened with laughter and light. The older villagers lean against one another in quiet comfort, sharing the low conversation, their voices rising and falling like a gentle tide, recounting tales of storms weathered, fish caught, trades made, and long ago festivals filled with dancing and song. Occasionally, a laugh breaks through, deep and belly-warmed, or high and ringing like a chime, and ripples outward, pulling smiles from even those who sit at the farthest edge of the circle. A jug of watered-down mead is passed hand to hand, its sweetness cutting through the salt of the meal, while smaller clay cups of herb-infused water, chilled from a nearby stream, offer a refreshing contrast to the midday warmth. A pair of young women pluck harp-like tunes from simple stringed instruments, while a man hums a tune with no clear words, just sound and melody blending into the rustling leaves above. No one hurries, no one urges the others to return to work, for this hour belongs not to labor, but to sustenance and presence, to being together beneath the wide sky and the old tree whose roots dig deep into the earth that holds their ancestors. Birds flit between the branches, dropping occasional feathers that drift downward, like bits of sky come to rest upon the shoulders of those gathered below. The village dog lies sprawled in the shade, one ear twitching lazily as it dreams, its belly rising and falling in steady rhythm with the quiet calm surrounding it. Ingrid finishes her stew and wipes the bowl clean with the last crust of bread before setting it aside, leaning back against the trunk of the elder tree, her eyes closing for a moment as the soft murmur of the group continues around her, lulling her into a peaceful half-sleep. The sun shifts slightly, changing the angle of shadows on the ground, and a cool breeze picks up from the sea, rustling the leaves above like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. And you, dear listener, resting within this gentle gathering, may feel the warmth of shared food and sunlight on your face, the hush of breeze through leaves, the subtle weight of togetherness pressing softly on your shoulders like a wool blanket on a cool afternoon. Let yourself be nourished by this moment, not just in body, but in spirit. Let the simplicity of stew and bread, the rhythm of conversation, the closeness of others, and the steadiness of the tree root you hear in calm, here, where time moves slowly and joy is measured not in noise, but in nearness. You are safe, fed, and held. There is nothing to do but breathe, to listen, to drift. Let the midday hush enfold you, and sleep, if you wish, beneath the elder tree, as the golden hue of midday begins its slow transformation into the softer tones of afternoon, casting long shadows across the well-trodden paths of the Viking coastal village. The sun hangs at a comfortable slant in the sky, warming the air without the weight of its earlier intensity. The sea breeze picks up in quiet intervals, ruffling linen tunics, tugging at the curls of grass growing between stone pathways, and fluttering the edges of woven reed panels that form the sides of the village's boat shelter. Situated at the edge of the shore, just above the high tide line, where the sand turns to packed earth, the boat shelter stands open on three sides, its timber posts darkened by salt air and age, its sloped roof thatched tightly against the elements. Inside, the scent is a mix of dried kelp, sun-bleached rope, old wood, and the faint residue of pine tar, a sharp tang that lingers in the nostrils and clings to the fingers. It is here that the slow, rhythmic work of repair takes place, a steady symphony of creaking wood, scraping tools, and the occasional soft grunt or muttered phrase as villagers tend to their vessels, boats that carry not only fish and supplies, but the continuity of generations across water and time. Leif crouches beneath the hull of his family's fishing skiff, its sides lifted slightly on stone blocks, his hands moving with practiced confidence as he scrapes away the worn pitch from the seams between planks. His shirt sticks to his back with sweat, but he works unbothered, brow furrowed in quiet concentration as flecks of blackened resin fall to the ground like brittle leaves. Beside him, Ingrid helps to prepare a new length of rope, coiling it carefully in wide loops after twisting and tightening it with a weighted spindle. Her fingers raw but steady, her expression one of quiet focus. The air inside the shelter is filled with purposeful sound, the rasp of iron on wood, the hollow echo of hammering on curved hulls, the hiss of a boiling tar pot over a small fire at the edge of the structure. From time to time, someone steps out into the sunlight to stretch, to sip water from a leather skin, or to glance toward the horizon where the returning boats dot the sea like dark birds gliding toward the shore. The voices inside remain low and steady, often lapsing into silence, not from tension but from familiarity. This is work that speaks for itself, that requires no boasting, only attention and respect. A boy, no older than 12, is being shown how to sand a small oar by one of the elders, the two of them seated cross-legged on a mat of woven reeds. The elder's voice, a slow, calming murmur as he guides the child's movements, correcting with a nod rather than a word. Outside the shelter, seagulls wheel in lazy circles, crying occasionally, their sharp calls carried inland on the wind and softened by distance. Sunlight reflects off the water in shifting patterns that dance across the undersides of the shelter's beams, creating a dappled effect like waves flickering through wood. A pile of worn nets waits to be mended nearby, and a woman with silver-threaded braids sits cross-legged beside them, drawing her needle through the torn mesh with a rhythm that mirrors the gentle lapping of waves against the dock. The entire scene pulses with the low hum of shared purpose, a kind of grounded harmony that holds the community together not through spectacle, but through the weaving of simple tasks repeated with care and intention. Ingrid wipes sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, then leans into the sunlight for a moment, letting its warmth ease the tension in her shoulders. Her eyes closed as the breeze brushes past her face like a whispered blessing. A gull lands near the entrance of the shelter and hops twice toward the pile of discarded scraps before being gently shooed away by one of the elders with a chuckle and a wave. Laughter bubbles briefly, light and easy, then subsides into the rhythm of tools and breath once more. The boats, though still, seem to hum with the anticipation of return. Soon, they will ride the tide again, their seams sealed, their sails folded neatly, their ropes coiled like sleeping snakes, ready to unfurl. The wind smells faintly of pine and salt and something distant, perhaps a coming change in weather, or simply the shifting of the tide, always moving, always returning. And you, dear listener, seated quietly among the soft scrape and gentle hammer of the boat shelter, may find your breath sinking with the pulse of this afternoon work, your thoughts smoothing like the sanded edge of an oar, your body relaxing into the rhythm of simple care. Let the sounds of scraping wood, whispered instruction, and the rustle of linen shirts in the wind soothe you like a lullaby sung in action rather than voice. Here, beneath the slanted roof and sun-dappled beams, surrounded by the presence of useful hands and shared purpose, there is peace in motion, comfort in craft, and rest in the knowledge that everything needed is already here. Let the afternoon hold you like a hammock between two trees, rocking slowly to the rhythm of the wind, and sleep if you must, for there is no urgency, only the tide, the tools, the hands that build and mend, and the quiet welcome of rest as the long day gradually yields to the softer hues of approaching evening. The Viking coastal village quiets into a serene stillness, the energy of labor fading like echoes on the wind, while the golden light of the setting sun bathes the land in warm, amber tones that stretch across rooftops, worn paths, and open courtyards, touching every surface with a gentle farewell. Along the shoreline, the tide begins its slow return, creeping silently over the sand that had been left bare by the morning's retreat. The waves now moving with a hushed reverence, as if the sea itself were offering back something precious it had borrowed earlier in the day. Ingrid sits on a low, smooth boulder near the water's edge, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, the hem pulled over her knees, as a light breeze brushes in from the open sea and plays with the loose strands of hair that have escaped her braid. The sky above her glows in gradients of lavender, dusty pink, and deepening blue, streaked with long, delicate clouds that stretch across the horizon like threads woven by unseen hands. The boats are moored now, gently rocking in the shallow water, their sails folded and furled, their hulls dark against the illuminated surface of the inlet, the wood glistening where the tide begins to touch them once again. Nearby, other villagers gather in quiet companionship, seated on stones or leaning against driftwood logs, their eyes turned toward the sea as they speak softly, if at all, their voices carried away by the wind before they can rise too high. The smoke from evening fires curls upward into the cooling air, mingling with the salty scent of the tide and the faint aroma of roasting root vegetables and fish still lingering from the communal meal. Children chase one another along the shallows, their feet splashing in the cold surf, their laughter sharp and bright, but never disruptive, blending easily with the murmur of the waves and the rustle of reeds that line the path behind them. Ingrid's gaze remains fixed on the horizon, where the last sliver of sun dips below the distant edge of the sea, its final light refracting across the water in a trail of shimmering gold that ripples and wavers like the delicate fabric of a dream. The sea seems endless in this light, stretching into a velvet distance that promises both mystery and memory, holding within its depths the stories of those who came before and those who will follow. A seabird coasts overhead in wide, lazy circles, its silhouette sharp against the pale fire of the western sky, and from the rocks further out, the low call of seals drifts inland, mournful, melodic, as if singing to the sun as it vanishes. The shadows lengthen slowly across the sand, stretching from boulder to boat, from drying rack to resting form, until they converge in soft darkness that spreads like a blanket across the beach. One by one, the villagers begin to rise, brushing sand from their cloaks, exchanging murmured goodnights, their silhouettes momentarily framed against the glowing sea, before disappearing into the narrow paths that lead between houses. Ingrid remains seated, her arms wrapped around her knees, watching as the tide washes further in, claiming more of the shore with each whispering wave, the foam white and delicate against the darkened sand. She breathes deeply, her chest rising and falling in time with the sea, her thoughts slowing, her body relaxing into the coolness of the coming night. A star appears in the east, faint but steady, followed by another and another, until the sky above becomes a dome of silent, flickering lights. The wind softens, settling into a calm hush that holds everything: sand, sea, stone, soul, in a perfect moment of stillness. And you, dear listener, seated beside Ingrid, or perhaps only beside the echo of her presence, may feel the same peace weaving gently into your thoughts, quieting the echoes of the day, smoothing the sharp corners of worry, softening your breath into stillness. Let the tides return, wash over your mind like a lullaby of salt and thyme, its rhythm slow and constant, its song wordless but full of meaning. Here, where light meets water, where the day's end is a benediction rather than a conclusion, you are invited to rest. Let the shadows hold you, the stars guide you, the sea lull you. Let go of everything but the sound of the waves and the cooling wind and the silence between heartbeats. The tide has returned. The day has ended. And here, on this quiet shore, beneath the ancient sky, You are safe, and you are home. As the twilight deepens and the sky darkens to a velvet shade of indigo, the Viking coastal village withdraws gently from the lingering remnants of day, folding itself into warmth, memory, and silence beneath the soft hush of the night. The stars above emerge more boldly now, shimmering against the dark canopy like tiny, watchful eyes scattered across the heavens, while the breeze from the sea grows cooler, threading its way through narrow lanes and around longhouse walls, carrying with it the scent of salt, smoke, and faint traces of pine. Inside Ingrid's family longhouse, the world feels smaller, cozier, and cloaked in the flickering intimacy of firelight. The central hearth glows with steady amber coals, the flames low but bright, licking softly at split logs and casting golden light across the packed earthen floor, and the worn wooden beams that arch overhead like the ribs of a great ship. Shadows leap and dance across the walls, stretching and shrinking with each breath of the fire, while above, bundles of herbs and dried fish sway gently from their hooks in the rafters, shifting as the heat rises in gentle waves. Ingrid crouches beside the hearth, one hand outstretched toward the iron pot nestled among the coals, her fingers steady as she stirs a thick mixture of barley, wild mushrooms, and goat's milk into a slow-simmered porridge, the aroma rich and earthy, weaving into the warm air and settling into the folds of every blanket and cloak. Around her, the longhouse is quiet, filled not with absence, but with peace, the kind of silence that feels sacred, earned, and complete. Her mother reclines nearby, with her feet wrapped in thick wool, her head tilted back against a rolled fur, eyes closed, but not asleep, simply listening to the subtle symphony of home, the soft crackling of the fire, the occasional creak of wood shifting with temperature, the rhythmic breathing of those at rest. Children murmur in low voices from the corner, half buried beneath furs, whispering stories they've invented, their tones hushed and giggling as they twist scraps of cloth into imaginary creatures. Ingrid's younger brother lies stretched near the fire, tracing patterns in the soot with a small stick, while a kitten dozes nearby, curled tight into a ball of warmth and fur. The walls of the longhouse glow under the firelight, revealing the faint etchings and decorations that mark every surface, runes carved in reverence, animals inked in ochre and soot, and lines drawn by children in years past, still preserved beneath the layers of soot and time. The thick wooden door is bolted shut now, keeping out the chill and any stray gusts of sea wind, while heavy pelts have been draped across the doorframe to keep the heat from slipping away too quickly. Hanging lanterns, fashioned from iron and animal horn, flicker softly from low hooks, casting pools of golden light that ripple and merge like reflections in a stream. Ingrid ladles a portion of the thick porridge into a shallow wooden bowl and passes it to her father, who sits cross-legged on a woven mat, his face weathered by sun and sea, but gentled by the moment, his hands steady as he receives the warmth. They speak little, content with shared space, their connection expressed not through words, but through gesture, an offered bowl, a quiet smile, a touch to the shoulder. Someone begins humming a soft tune, a lullaby learned from a grandmother, long gone, and for a moment, the longhouse becomes a cradle of sound and warmth, the melody curling into the corners and resting like mist on every surface. Outside, the wind whistles low along the edges of the roof, but it is distant, more song than threat, and the longhouse holds steady against it, a vessel of comfort and continuity. The fire flares briefly, casting a warm glow that fills the room with the illusion of sunrise, then settles again into its rhythmic flicker, inviting sleep without commanding it. Ingrid tucks her feet beneath her cloak, leaning back on her hands, letting her gaze wander along the ceiling, where the firelight dances in patterns like stars reflected in water. Her breathing slows. Her thoughts drift. The cares of the day, ropes and fish, smoke and sea, slip away, carried out with the tide, and replaced with only presence, only warmth. And you, dear listener, seated quietly in a shadowed corner, or perhaps resting with your head near the fire, may feel this peace wrapping around you like the folds of a thick blanket, the heat from the coals brushing your skin like the memory of sunlight, the quiet of the longhouse, offering you not only rest, but welcome. Let your eyes grow heavy in the glow of the hearth. Let the fire's rhythm match your breath. Let the silence fill you, not with emptiness, but with calm. You're safe here, in this place lit by ancient fire and held together by quiet love. Sleep, if you haven't already. Drift softly into the warmth, the light, and the stillness. There is nothing more to do. There is only now. As the sky turns deeper still, the final traces of twilight dissolving into a velvety, starlit blackness that stretches endlessly above the Viking coastal village. The hush of true night arrives, settling like a soft blanket over the land, the sea, and the hearts of those who live between them. The longhouses rest in slumber, their windows dimmed, save for the faint glow of banked embers, while chimneys release their last whispers of smoke into the chilled night air. All around, the world has slowed to near stillness. No more hammering of tools or laughter of children, no footsteps upon the paths, only the gentle murmur of waves kissing the shore in a timeless, soothing rhythm. Down near the beach, just beyond the last drying wreck, and past the path where the fishing nets have been bundled for the morning, Ingrid walks slowly, her boots pressing into the damp sand, her cloak drawn close as the wind dances around her ankles and swirls the hem like a wave of wool and shadow. Above her, the stars blaze brilliantly, unmasked by cloud or torchlight, their reflection shimmering faintly on the surface of the tide, which moves now in slow, deliberate breaths. Each wave that arrives does so with quiet purpose, breaking softly over pebbles and shells before receding with a sigh, leaving behind a glassy trail of foam that quickly vanishes into darkness. The moon hangs low and full tonight, its pale light gilding the ocean in streaks of silver and pooling across the sand like liquid frost. It casts Ingrid's shadow behind her, long and thin, and bathes her face in a calm, luminous glow that mirrors the serenity in her eyes. She carries no lantern. She needs none, for the moon and stars illuminate the beach well enough, revealing every drift of seaweed, every feather, every tiny shell glinting like a jewel among the stones. She stops at the water's edge, letting the surf rush softly over her boots, the cold seeping up through the leather and into her skin in a quiet, bracing touch that anchors her in the moment. Behind her, the village slumbers, unaware of her solitary vigil, and before her, the sea stretches into eternity, dark, infinite, alive with secrets. She closes her eyes for a moment and listens, not just to the sea, but to everything. The breeze tugging gently at the reeds, the low hoot of an owl somewhere among the cliffs, the occasional rustle of unseen movement in the grasses behind her, and beneath it all, the slow, even beat of her own heart. These are the sounds of life that persist even in stillness, the sounds that speak not with urgency, but with the weight of time, of generation standing at this same shore, watching the same tide, breathing the same salt-tinged air. Ingrid kneels, then, her hands brushing the wet sand, her fingers tracing the tiny ridges left behind by the sea. She picks up a small, smooth stone, rounded by years of tumbling, and turns it over in her palm. Its surface glistens in the moonlight, cool and unremarkable, yet somehow deeply beautiful in its simplicity. She places it in her pocket, not as a treasure, but as a reminder that moments like this are what shape the soul, just as water shapes stone, slow and unseen. Above her, the constellations rotate, stars shifting with the invisible wheels of the heavens, and for a fleeting moment, she feels herself to be part of that vast movement, not separate, not small, but woven into the pattern of everything. Her breath moves slowly in her chest, each inhale deep and cleansing, each exhale leaving behind a trace of warmth in the cold night. She stands once more, brushing the sand from her hands, and turns to walk back toward the village, her footprints vanishing as quickly as they are made, erased by the gentle reach of the tide. The longhouses come back into view, one by one, dark shapes against the lighter sky, each holding within them the warmth of fire, the softness of sleep, the quiet assurance of belonging. And you, dear listener, walking alongside Ingrid in silence, or perhaps simply watching her from a distance in the theater of your imagination, may feel this moment settle into your own heart, the cool air on your cheeks, the firm sand beneath your feet, the endless rhythm of the sea whispering comfort in a language older than words. Let it wash over you like the tide, soothing and slow, drawing you deeper into the calm, into the quiet, into yourself. There is no need to speak, no need to move. Just be. Let the sound of waves and the hush of the night guide you gently to rest. Let the stars keep watch, the moonlight warm your skin, and the wind sing soft lullabies. You are here, you are held, and you are safe. Now breathe, slowly, deeply. Sleep gently. The sea will watch over you as the moon sails higher into the ink-dark sky, casting a soft, silvery glow across the vast sweep of the Viking coastline. The village beneath it drifts further into its nighttime hush, wrapped in the comforting rhythm of waves, wind, and the faintest whisper of distant seabirds calling from unseen cliffs. The longhouses lie silent now, their doorways drawn shut with heavy pelts, hearths banked to glowing embers, and only the occasional flicker of light behind woven windows betraying the life within. Far above this still and slumbering world, on the crest of a grassy rise that watches over both the settlement and the open sea, the night watch begins, an ancient duty passed down through generations, as much about presence as protection, and carried out not with urgency, but with quiet reverence. Here, at the edge of a flattened stone outcrop, near the remains of an old fire pit, stands Eric, one of the village's elder warriors, his figure cloaked in heavy wool, his silhouette outlined against the moonlight as he gazes steadily across the dark water. His spear rests upright beside him, not in readiness for battle, but as a symbol of vigilance, of tradition, of the thin but unbroken thread that connects the living to the guardians of old. A fur-wrapped lantern glows softly at his feet, casting a gentle amber light that barely touches the stone, but serves as a warm beacon in the cold night. He shifts only occasionally, his breath curling visibly in the cool air, his eyes scanning the horizon, not with suspicion but with familiarity. The sea below is calm tonight, its surface rippling like silk beneath the moon, the tide at its peak and holding steady, whispering up and down the beach with a soothing consistency. The boats in the inlet rock gently at their moorings, the ropes creaking softly, their wooden hulls knocking ever so faintly against one another in a chorus, so subtle it feels more like memory than sound. From his perch, Eric can see almost the entire village. Rooftops gently reflecting moonlight, paths that twist between houses and gardens like pale threads, and the darker patches where trees sway gently in the breeze. Every once in a while, a flicker of movement catches his eye, a shudder stirred by the wind, a fox slinking near the edge of the grain store, the flutter of wings from an owl rising silently into the sky. But mostly, there is stillness, deep, ancient stillness that seems to extend beyond the moment and into the very bones of the earth. Behind him, nestled against the hill slope, rests a small shelter of stone and timber where the watchkeeper may sit, rest, and warm his hands when the hours grow long. A low fire burns there now, the smoke trailing upward in a faint gray ribbon that quickly disappears into the stars. A pot of herbs steams gently on a flat rock near the coals, and the scent of yarrow, pine resin, and dried mint drifts into the air, mingling with the salt carried inland by the sea wind. Eric does not retreat to the warmth just yet. He remains at the edge of the rise, hands clasped behind his back, listening to the night as one might listen to a story being told in a language older than speech. Somewhere below, a dog barks once, then falls silent again, and farther out, at the far edge of the bay, the distant crash of a larger wave echoes faintly, a deep, resonant thrum that seems to vibrate through the soles of his boots and into the stone beneath. He knows this hill well, every rise and dip, every crooked tree and embedded rock. He has stood here many nights, in all seasons, under storms and stars alike, and each time the land speaks to him in the same way, with calm, with purpose, with quiet strength. Tonight, as the constellations shift slowly overhead, marking the passage of time in patient arcs, Eric allows himself to breathe deeply and slowly, his mind still, his senses open. He is not waiting for danger. He is keeping the rhythm, keeping the pattern, holding space so that others may sleep in peace, And you, dear listener, looking out with him from this high perch, may feel the same serenity settling around your shoulders, the same vast calm entering your chest, your thoughts ebbing like the tide below. Let the cold air sharpen your senses, only to soften them again with each breath. Let the distant sea sing its lullaby beneath the stars. Let the glow of the lantern and the slow burn of the fire remind you that presence alone can be a kind of protection. You are watching with Eric. Now, you are part of the long chain of guardians who have stood beneath moon and sky, listening to silence and honoring stillness. Let this night cradle you. Let it hold your fears, your weariness, your thoughts. Here on the hill, nothing is asked of you but to be, and in being, you rest. In watching, you release. The sea does not hurry, the stars do not falter, and neither must you. Let your body grow heavy. Let your breath match the rhythm of the waves. Let sleep find you gently, quietly, like mist on a moonlit shore. As the hush of deep night takes hold and the stars overhead glitter in fuller brilliance, unchallenged now by even the faintest glimmers of village light, the Viking coastal world wraps itself tightly in a cocoon of rest. Yet within the stillness, gentle activity continues in pockets of warmth and flickering firelight. Inside the longhouse closest to the cliffs, where the roof slopes low and the wooden beams have blackened from decades of smoke, a quiet domestic ritual unfolds, not urgent, not loud, but steady and purposeful, as Ingrid sits cross-legged near the fire, a bundle of worn linen and wool spread across her lap, her fingers moving patiently through the fabric in the timeless task of mending. The hearth beside her glows with a soft, red-orange light, casting a halo of warmth across the room and lighting her face in delicate contrast, highlighting the fine curve of her brow, the thoughtful press of her lips, and the faint smudge of soot along her cheek where she had brushed a curl away earlier. Her needle, forged from bone and smoothed over years of use, gleams faintly in the firelight each time it arcs upward and slips cleanly through the cloth, drawing the thread behind it in a smooth, silent loop. The fabric rustles gently beneath her fingers, a mix of woven tunics and patched cloaks, sleeves that have frayed from labor, knees thinned from kneeling in boats or on damp ground, collars loosened by salt and time. Each piece tells a story of work and weather, and each stitch she makes feels like a whisper of care sent backwards and forwards through time. Around her, the longhouse is thick with the scent of the day's labor, fish oil, smoke, wool grease, dried herbs, and beneath that, the subtler notes of wood, clay, and the faint, sweet trace of lavender that had been scattered on the floor weeks ago, and now lingers only in memory. A fur-draped bench supports her back, and beside her, a small cup of honeyed water sits warming on a flat stone, steam rising in thin tendrils that curl and vanish into the shadows above. The only sounds are the soft clicks of the needle passing through fabric, the slow breathing of her younger brother, asleep on a mat nearby, and the occasional pop of sap in the fire as a log gives way to flame. The lantern overhead swings slightly with each shift in the wind outside, casting moving shadows Along the rafters, where bundles of dried reeds, seagrass rope, and smoked herbs are tucked for future use. The flicker of light across these shapes creates the illusion of motion, like stories being told silently against the wood. Ingrid hums softly under her breath, not a melody with words, but something remembered, something her mother used to murmur during the long winter months when mending was a near nightly duty. It wraps around the firelight like a thread around cloth, a sound that comforts without calling attention to itself, that fills the silence without breaking it. Occasionally, she pauses to knot the thread, to stretch her back, to sip from the warm cup, the sweetness soothing her throat and grounding her in the present moment. Outside, the wind rustles low through the grass and hums faintly against the doorframe. And somewhere far off, the cry of a night bird echoes once before, fading into the vastness. The fire beside her dies lower still, collapsing into its bed of coals with a soft sigh. But Ingrid works on, finishing one patch and moving to the next, her fingers steady, her thoughts drifting like sea foam across memory and hope. She thinks of the next morning's chores, of the salted fish that must be turned, of the nets that need folding, of the song her brother asked her to teach him, and of the dream she had the night before, boats full of light, floating quietly across the sky, like stars given wood and sail. And you, dear listener, watching her from a warm place just out of sight, or perhaps only following the rhythm of her stitches in your mind, may find your own breath slowing to match hers, your shoulders softening, your heart quieting as you witness this tender labor. Let the firelight settle into your bones. Let the sound of needle and thread soothe your thoughts. Let the hush of this scene wrap around you like the cloak being mended in her lap, warm, worn, and entirely enough. In this moment, there is no rush, no noise, no need to explain or achieve. Only care, only presence, only the soft song of hands at work beneath a roof that has seen many seasons. Close your eyes now. Breathe in the smoke, the wool, the lavender, faint on the air. You are here. You are safe. Let the night hold you gently. Let the fire keep its quiet watch. Let sleep find you, as surely as her needle finds the next stitch, as the final hours of night slip slowly toward the horizon, and the stars begin to fade like distant embers, cooling in the vast hearth of the sky. The Viking coastal village still lies mostly in slumber, wrapped in the deep hush of pre-dawn, when even the sea seems to breathe more slowly, and the wind drifts like a whisper through empty lanes and sleeping gardens. Yet within one of the thatch-roofed longhouses near the edge of the pasture, a quiet rustling breaks the stillness, a low shuffle of movement, soft and practiced, as Ingrid rises from her bedding, drawing her thick woolen cloak around her shoulders and slipping her feet into boots, still slightly damp from the day before. The hearth behind her glows faintly with the remains of last night's fire, the coals giving off a lazy warmth that casts her elongated shadow across the stone floor as she moves toward the door. With careful hands, she lifts the heavy fur covering from the entrance, allowing in a burst of cold, salt-tinged air that carries the scent of frost, distant pine, and the faintest memory of seaweed from the shore. The sky outside is deep blue, not yet touched by dawn, but the faintest gray outlines are beginning to stretch along the horizon, like breath fogging a window. She steps out into the cold, her breath forming clouds that trail behind her, and walks the familiar path toward the animal pen, her boots crunching softly against the frozen grass. The world is silent, but not empty. It is filled with the presence of all things waiting: earth waiting for light, animals waiting for warmth, sky waiting for color. The wooden pen stands beside a slope of low land ringed with stones to block the wind and reinforced with thick planks cut from driftwood and forest trees. Inside, the animals stir as she approaches. Slow movements, soft snorts, the creak of limbs waking from rest. The goats rise first, their eyes bright in the low light, their breath steaming as they crowd gently toward the gate, bleating softly, not with impatience, but with the trust of creatures who know they are cared for. Ingrid speaks to them in low tones, words more sound than meaning, her voice a thread of warmth woven into the cool morning air. She opens the gate and enters, her arms filled with bunches of dried hay, wrapped in cloth the night before, still fragrant with the scent of late summer fields. The goats eat eagerly, their mouths moving rhythmically, their tails flicking contentedly as she strokes their sides and inspects their coats for signs of cold or wear. Beyond them, the cow stands slowly, her breath a misty plume in the gray, her large eyes blinking sleepily as Ingrid moves toward her, offering the bundle of crushed oats and herbs reserved especially for her. The cow's warm tongue flicks out, brushing Ingrid's hand as she feeds her, and the deep, resonant sound of contented chewing fills the space like a song of peace. Behind the pen, chickens cluck and shift within their wooden coop, sensing motion, and Ingrid moves there next, lifting the hatch and scattering a handful of cracked grains, her hand sure and steady despite the chill. The hens descend with gentle flutters, their claws clicking against the worn wood as they peck methodically, their rust-colored feathers brightening slightly in the faint, early light. A rooster gives a half-hearted crow, more yawn than announcement, and perches on the edge of the doorframe, watching the sky with a knowing stillness. The air is changing now, subtly but surely. The stars are fewer, the dark is softer, a faint gold brushes the edge of the clouds, and somewhere far off, a bird calls once, hesitant and lonely, as though checking to see if it is time. Ingrid leans against the pen for a moment, her hands tucked into her sleeves, her body still, letting the moment settle around her like a shawl. The animals, now fed and warm, move more slowly, returning to nests of straw or nuzzling against each other, the sounds of the pen shifting from wakefulness to comfort. She watches the sky lighten further, an inch of rose spreading through the indigo, a delicate signal to the rest of the village that the day will soon begin. She closes the coop gently, fastens the gate with a simple twist of rope, and begins walking back toward the longhouse, her boots now brushing against softer, thawed patches of ground. Smoke has begun to rise from a few neighboring homes, thin and tentative, as others begin to stir from slumber. The sea, once a silent partner, in the night, murmurs more clearly now, each wave brushing the shore with greater confidence. Ingrid pauses near her door, looking back once more at the pen, at the rising smoke, at the sky now streaked with pale fire. Her heart feels full, not with excitement, but with steadiness, with gratitude, with the knowledge that she, like her animals, has her place in the turning world. And you, dear listener, standing quietly beside her in your imagination or tucked in a warm bed far from the sea, may feel that same stillness bloom inside you, the peace of rhythm, the joy of small duties done with love, the profound calm of sharing dawn with creatures who ask for nothing but care. Let it settle in your chest like warmth from a shared fire. Let the quiet world of the pre-dawn farmyard lull you. Let the breath of the cow, the flutter of the hen, the crunch of hay underfoot guide you gently toward sleep. It is not morning, yet not truly. There is still time, still hush, still softness. Breathe slowly, rest deeply. The animals are fed, the world is turning, and you are safe as the sun rises slowly over the Viking coastal village and spills its early light like liquid gold across the still damp sand. The thin rays touch everything with a hushed reverence. The jagged tops of the wooden longhouses, the smoothed stones along the shore, and the quiet figures already beginning the day's work long before the village is fully awake. A pale mist still lingers in pockets across the grass and shoreline, clinging low like a veil that resists the warmth of morning just a little longer. Down near the drying racks, where the sea has receded to reveal a gleaming tide line of salt-crusted earth, Ingrid walks with quiet purpose, her boots crunching softly as they break through the crusted salt that has hardened overnight in the spaces between the stone foundations of the fish racks. Her cloak is pinned high to her shoulders to allow freedom of movement, her sleeves rolled past her elbows, exposing forearms marked faintly with the white dust of previous mornings. A thick wooden tool, curved at the tip and smoothed by years of use, rests in her gloved hand, and with slow, practiced strokes, she begins to scrape at the salt-encrusted beams beneath the drying fish. The motion is repetitive and deliberate. Scrape, pause, scrape, each pass of the blade, sending tiny flecks of crystalline salt into the shallow baskets lined beside her, where it gathers like snow in the woven fibers. Around her, the drying racks creak softly in the breeze, their crossbeams lined with rows of fish, split open, salted, and stretched tight by string and hook, glistening faintly as the salt continues to pull the last of the moisture from their flesh. The smell is sharp, but not unpleasant, a mixture of sea air, old wood, sun-warmed brine, and the faint tang of drying fish that clings to every thread of fabric and every fold of the landscape. Overhead, gulls wheel and cry in long, lazy arcs, their wings lit from below by the golden glow of sunrise. While down at her feet, the salt baskets grow steadily heavier. Ingrid hums as she works, a soft sound lost quickly in the wind, not meant to be heard by others, but to carry her through the rhythm of the task. Her back aches slightly from bending, and her shoulders bear the fatigue of many mornings like this, but her movements never slow. They are born of memory, not effort. From time to time, she straightens to glance at the sea, where the tide continues its slow retreat, exposing slick rocks and kelp-draped logs along the shallows. Other villagers have begun to appear now, silhouetted in the light mist, some with baskets, others with nets slung over their shoulders, and a few elders walking with staffs, their breath visible as they exchange quiet greetings. Children skip past with bare feet and wild hair, their laughter a bright counterpoint to the soft sigh of the waves, and some stop to scoop up handfuls of broken shells or to trace patterns in the salt-streaked sand with pointed sticks. Ingrid continues scraping, moving methodically from one section of rack to the next, each spot revealing the glittering crust left behind by the ebbing sea and the drying process itself, a precious resource to be gathered, stored, and eventually traded or used in cooking and preservation. The salt is more than just seasoning here. It is life, currency, medicine, preservation, and ritual, all in one. Beside her, a new worker joins. A boy not yet old enough to know the ache of a full day's labor, but old enough to learn the value of steady hands. Ingrid nods to him silently and hands him a spare tool, showing with a gesture how to angle the blade, how to drag with just the right pressure so that the wood beneath is left unharmed. He watches closely and mirrors her movements, and they work in quiet tandem as the sun climbs higher, slowly dissolving the mist until the beach glows in full morning. Voices carry now, low conversations, the squeak of wooden wheels, the bleating of a distant goat, yet none of it breaks the peacefulness of the moment. There is a calmness in such work, a meditative stillness that comes from doing a task whose rhythm aligns with the earth's own cycles. Ingrid wipes the back of her hand across her brow, the salt stinging slightly where it catches her skin, and looks down at the now full baskets, their contents glinting like crushed glass under the sunlight. She sets aside her tool and begins to lift the baskets one by one, her boots slipping slightly on the wet ground as she makes her way toward the storehouse. And you, dear listener, standing with her in this sun-washed moment, or watching quietly from the edge of the scene, in your imagination, may find your own breath matching the pace of her work, your thoughts softening into the gentle scrape-scrape of wood against salt, your body relaxing with each sigh of the wind. Let the rhythm lull you, the scrape, the wind, the gulls, the sea. Let the scent of salt and morning light wrap around you like a woolen shawl. Here, in the quiet beauty of a coastal morning, among drying fish and glittering salt, there is no need to rush. You are part of the tide, the task, the breath of the land. Let it carry you into stillness. Let it cradle you in calm. Sleep, if you must. The salt will keep its watch, and the sea will return again as the full light of morning settles over the Viking coastal village, brightening every stone, thatch, and ripple of seaweed-strewn sand with a clean, golden glow. The village begins to hum with gentle movement, no longer the hush of pre-dawn, but not yet the bustling pace of midday. Between long houses, voices rise softly, interwoven with the occasional clatter of a bucket, the creak of a wheelbarrow axle, or the rhythmic thunk of a hammer striking wood. But near the edge of the settlement, just beyond the last drying rack and beside a small lean-to made of driftwood and carved beams, the world feels quieter, more deliberate, as Ingrid sits cross-legged on a broad flat stone, surrounded by a spread of tools that catch the sunlight in glints and sparkles, each one waiting for the care only patience and muscle memory can provide. In her lap rests a well-worn whetstone, long and gray, its edges rounded smooth by years of use. She dips her fingers into a shallow clay bowl of oil and drips it across the stone's surface, watching it glisten before lifting a short-bladed skinning knife and pressing it gently against the stone at just the right angle. With a steady hand, she draws the blade across, the sound a soft, satisfying hiss, like a whisper shared between old friends. Again and again, she draws the blade, flips it, draws again, each motion slow, even, unhurried. The process is more than maintenance. It is ritual. Around her lie other blades, fish knives, bone cleavers, wood scrapers, hide punchers, all made by the village's blacksmith or handed down through the generations. Their handles worn smooth by the touch of many hands. Some bear runes carved into their grips. Others still have remnants of sinew-wrapped hilts or bits of cloth knotted at the base, reminders of who last wielded them or for what purpose. As she works, the scent of oil and iron rises gently in the warm morning air, mingling with the salty tang of the nearby sea and the earthy aroma of sun-warmed grass. Birds call overhead, darting between the thatched rooftops and the high branches of the nearby pines. Their cries sharp and sweet, a counterpoint to the even rhythm of blade against stone. A warm breeze stirs Ingrid's braid across her shoulder and sends small ripples through the bowl of oil at her feet. Nearby, a cluster of children pass by, their voices low as they chase one another with sticks carved into imaginary swords. But they fall silent as they see her sharpening. One boy watches for a long moment, his eyes wide at the smoothness of her movement, the ease with which the blade gleams sharper with each pass. She says nothing, only nods once before returning to her task, the whetstone singing softly beneath her blade. Further up the hill, smoke begins to rise from the blacksmith's forge, and the first faint clang of hammer on steel rings out, distant but clear, like a bell marking the day's true beginning. Yet here, by the sea, Ingrid works in a different rhythm, slower, more meditative, timed not by heat and fire, but by focus, breath, and the ancient understanding that well-cared-for tools are the foundation of all survival. She finishes the small blade and sets it aside, its edge now razor-sharp, then lifts a longer seax, its edge nicked from a week of cleaning fish and carving rope. The process repeats: oil, angle, pressure, draw. Her hands moving with instinct rather than thought. In time, she pauses, stretching her legs and arms toward the sun, letting the warmth soak into her muscles and bones, loosening the tension from shoulders and wrists. The light glints off the surface of the sea, just visible beyond the drying racks, casting long streaks of reflection that shift with the water's dance. She watches for a moment, just a moment, as seabirds dip low over the waves and the silhouette of a boat drifts toward the outer bay. Then, slowly, she returns to the task, wiping the blade, lifting another, her breath calm, her movements precise. And you, dear listener, observing this quiet ritual from a safe distance, or perhaps curled beside her in the softness of thought and story, may feel your own mind begin to sharpen and then slow, not with effort, but with ease, like a blade drawn patiently across stone. Let your breathing match her rhythm. Let the sound of metal on stone lull your thoughts into silence. Let the warmth of morning and the steady hush of the sea cradle you as you rest in this place of calm purpose. There is no urgency here, no rush to complete, only care, only skill passed through time, only a moment stretched into peace. The blades will be ready, the day will unfold, and for now, you are safe to watch, to breathe, to close your eyes. Let the quiet work soothe you. Let the soft sounds of sharpening carry you gently, gently into rest as the morning gives way to a sun-drenched afternoon and the Viking coastal village basks in the calm brightness of a clear sky. Every shadow shortens, and the shimmer of sea and sky melds into a near-blinding brilliance that makes every ripple of water, every glint of iron, and every bead of sweat shine like polished silver. Down near the rocky path that curves along the inlet, just beside the weathered posts, where boats are tied and drying lines sway lightly in the breeze, Ingrid kneels in the open space of sun and salt, her fingers moving steadily across a massive tangle of fishing net laid out across the stone-paved ground, like a woven map of labor and tradition. The net, heavy with salt crust and the occasional glinting scale, stretches in long, looping coils that twist and turn over themselves, a complex lattice of knots, threads, and tiny wooden floats carved from driftwood and sealed in fish oil. Each strand carries the memory of the sea, rough and slick in places, sun-hardened in others, and the whole thing smells of brine, smoke, and faintly of kelp, a scent so familiar it seems to breathe from the very air around her. With slow, practiced movements, Ingrid begins to untangle and fold, starting from one end and working row by row, her fingers slipping easily into the loops, tugging gently, lifting, separating, and pulling each length into place with the patience of someone who has done this countless times before. Her knees press into the cool stone beneath her, and her shoulders bend rhythmically in time with the net's folds, a kind of silent dance that flows as surely as waves over sand. Around her, the village pulses gently with midday life, the muted hammering from the blacksmith's forge, the far-off echo of someone splitting logs, the faint murmur of voices near the well as women gather water in clay jars, their laughter rising every so often like the call of seabirds. A dog barks twice, then settles back beneath a cart, its tongue lolling lazily as it watches Ingrid work. Children pass now and then, hopping over ropes and driftwood piles, occasionally stopping to poke curiously at the net or offer a question. Did this one catch the silverbacks? Is there a hole in it? To which Ingrid responds with a soft smile or a shake of her head without pausing in her task. A breeze comes in from the sea, lifting the fringe of her braid and cooling her sun-warmed face, bringing with it the distant sound of waves tumbling softly against the rocks and the quiet slap of boat hulls rocking against their moorings. As she folds, Ingrid pauses to mend where needed, using a slim bone needle to re-thread frayed loops. Her stitches quick and strong, invisible to the untrained eye, but essential to the net's strength. She tucks loose ends neatly, runs her fingers across finished sections to test their give, and hums under her breath a low, tuneless sound meant only for herself and the open air, blending seamlessly with the background hum of the day. In a corner of the net, a piece of tangled seaweed clings stubbornly, and she plucks it free, lifting it to examine the tiny shells embedded in its fibers before flicking it aside and continuing. The net folds like cloth now, layered and smooth, row after row, forming a neat, weighty bundle that will be ready for the next outing. Perhaps tomorrow, when the tide turns and the wind signals good sailing. Overhead, gulls drift on the thermals, their white wings cutting through the sky like parchment feathers, and the sun beats down on everything evenly, without haste or harshness, just presence. The air smells rich with life. Net, sea, rope, sweat, sun, fish, and Ingrid feels the weight of time in her task, the understanding that this work has been done for generations and will be done for generations more. There is no hurry in her movements, only purpose, only quiet satisfaction in each completed fold, each repaired loop, each section laid down in its proper place. She works until the net is finished, folded into a square bundle bound by thick twine, and then she leans back, resting on her hands, letting her gaze drift toward the ocean, where the light sparkles like 1,000 coins scattered across the waves. And you, dear listener, sitting beside her in imagination or watching from the shade of a longhouse, may find your breath slowing, your shoulders loosening, your thoughts quieting, as the gentle repetition of folding and mending wraps around you like the net itself, soft yet strong, worn yet enduring. Let the sound of wind and waves, of distant voices and nearby birdsong lull you into calm. Let the sun-warmed stone beneath your legs anchor you. Let the scent of sea and salt carry you somewhere safe and timeless. There is no need to move now, no need to worry or speak. Just rest in the quiet task, in the steadiness of hands and wind and sea. Let yourself drift, gently, like a boat unmoored, carried only by the tide. Sleep if you like. The net is folded. The day is long, and everything is, for now, at peace. As the long, golden afternoon begins its slow descent into evening, and the light that once danced brightly on the sea begins to soften into warm hues of amber and rose, the Viking coastal village prepares itself for rest, not with sudden stillness, but with a quiet gathering in, a folding of tasks, a closing of spaces, a gentle sweeping away of the day's labors. Inside the longhouse that Ingrid calls home, the warmth of the midday fire has faded into a cradle of low glowing embers, and the scent of cooked grains, smoked fish, and sun-warmed wool clings softly to the thick timbers and earthen walls. The light slanting through the high slits in the roof throws elongated bands across the packed dirt floor, illuminating the woven mats and the worn benches, the driftwood shelves holding clay jars of herbs and oil, and the simple stone hearth at the center of the home, a place of cooking, of warmth, of stories, of stillness. Ingrid kneels beside it now, a small broom of bundled reeds in hand, her fingers darkened by ash and soot, as she carefully begins to sweep the outer edge of the hearth, her movements slow, deliberate, unhurried, each stroke drawing a soft whisper from the ash as it gathers into neat little piles. She leans in close, inspecting the coals, removing half-burned sticks, repositioning stones that have shifted, and clearing a space for the next fire to breathe clean and bright. The ashes, pale gray and flecked with tiny specks of glowing red, fall softly into a low clay bowl she's set beside her. The same bowl her grandmother used for the same purpose, its rim darkened by years of smoke and time. Her motions are rhythmic: sweep, gather, lift, each one infused with a kind of reverence, not because the hearth demands it, but because the act itself connects her to the hundreds of hands that have tended flames in the same way for generations. Around her, the longhouse holds a quiet peace, disturbed only by the faint rustle of the wind nudging the roof reeds and the occasional creak of the wood as it settles with the cooling air. The animals are fed, the nets are folded, the salt has been scraped, and now it is time to prepare the heart of the home for night. The hearth is more than just a place for fire. It is a center, a boundary between the wildness outside and the calm within. A place where food is prepared, where feet are warmed, where dreams are whispered, and shadows pushed gently back. As she works, Ingrid hums low in her throat, the tune without words, but thick with memory, her voice rising and falling with the brush of the broom. A kettle, half filled with water, rests on a flat stone beside her, catching the last light of day in its copper curve, and a few dried herbs, a sprig of thyme, a pinch of yarrow, wait beside it, ready to be steeped for the evening's tea. She finishes sweeping the hearth and pauses to wipe her hands on her apron, leaving faint prints of soot across the already stained fabric. Then she places a few small sticks in a loose pile, nestled against the glowing coals, and breathes gently onto them until the faintest lick of flame curls upward. Steady and sure, she feeds the fire with care. 2 more sticks, then a third, and watches as the light strengthens, reflecting in her eyes, warming the stones, painting the walls in gold and shadow. She reaches for a cloth and gently dusts the nearby shelf, adjusting a carved bowl, smoothing the edges of a fur throw. Her motions quiet, but full of purpose. Outside, the sun touches the horizon, setting the sky alight with streaks of crimson, lavender, and deep orange, and shadows stretch long across the village paths, spilling into corners, hugging the bases of walls and fences. A child's laughter echoes faintly from across the village, then fades into the hush of approaching night. Ingrid takes the clay bowl of ashes and steps outside for a moment, barefoot on the cool earth, her breath visible now as a soft mist in the air. She scatters the ashes in the garden plot near the doorway, where they will feed the soil and carry the memory of the hearth into the next season's growth. She stands for a moment in the fading light, watching the smoke rise from neighboring homes, listening to the soft lull of the sea now quieting for the evening. Before turning back inside, the fire now crackles gently, casting dancing light across the ceiling rafters and warming the room with its familiar breath. She sits beside it with the steaming cup of tea she's just brewed, her body settling, her hands wrapped around the clay vessel, the warmth seeping into her palms, her eyes heavy with the weight of the day. And you, dear listener, seated beside her in thought or wrapped in your own blankets, far away, may feel this peace settle over you too, like a shawl drawn gently across your shoulders. Let the sound of the fire calm your thoughts. Let the rhythm of her movements soften your breath. Let the quiet of the clean hearth remind you that rest is earned, that quiet is sacred, and that you are, in this moment, safe. Close your eyes. Let the day fade. Let the warmth of the fire and the whisper of wind against the thatch carry you into sleep. The hearth is clean. The home is ready. The night is yours to enter slowly, peacefully, completely. As night fully settled over the Viking coastal village, wrapping every home and path in a deep, velvety stillness, the world outside the longhouse fades into a hush, broken only by the gentle rhythm of the distant sea, its waves brushing the shore in soft, even pulses like a lullaby older than any words spoken by men. The stars have emerged fully now, brilliant and quiet in the ink-black sky, scattered across the heavens in patterns known by heart to sailors and storytellers alike, their faint shimmer mirrored in the pools left behind by the receding tide. The village itself has gone still, fires low and tended, tools stacked, doors shut against the cool wind that carries the faint scent of salt, pine, and the final embers of driftwood smoke. Within the longhouse, the warmth of the hearth glows gently across the walls, its light flickering over fur-lined beds, wooden beams, and baskets filled with wool, herbs, and the quiet necessities of life. Ingrid lies, curled beneath a thick woolen blanket, the weight of the day lifting from her limbs. Sleep draws closer with each passing breath. Her face, half lit by firelight and half silvered by moonlight, slipping through the roof vent, is soft with calm, the furrow in her brow from work and weather now smoothed by rest. Around her, the gentle crackle of the coals provides a familiar anchor, the sound weaving seamlessly into the steady hush of the sea, which continues its eternal rhythm just beyond the wooden walls. The entire longhouse is quiet, save for the soft, measured breathing of those who share the space. Her younger brother, murmuring faintly in dreams. Her grandfather's steady, deep breaths from the bench where he always sleeps, and the occasional shifting of a dog at the foot of the bedding, its tail thumping once in the dark before settling again. Outside, the wind nudges lightly at the thatch, soft brushing that speaks not of storm or change, but of continuity, of the sea's breath meeting the breath of the land in a gentle exchange. The fire dims further, casting longer, slower shadows until only its ember glow remains, like the heartbeat of the home pulsing low and slow into the night. In this moment, there is no work to be done, no nets to fold, no salt to scrape, or animals to tend. There is only rest, deep and earned, and the slow slide of the mind into the dream world, guided by the steady rhythm of the shore. Ingrid's breath evens, her hand tucked beneath her cheek, her thoughts no longer tethered to the day's labor, but drifting, perhaps over waves, perhaps through forest paths remembered only in dreams, perhaps into nothing at all. The sea continues to sing, its voice soft but unwavering, each wave breaking in perfect rhythm like a mother's hum over a cradle. like a memory too old to name. And you, dear listener, still resting with her in this quiet space, may feel the same pull toward rest, your limbs growing heavier, your breath slowing, your eyes softening into darkness. Let the sounds carry you, the distant wash of the tide, the hush of the wind through grass and reed, the final pop of a coal as it settles into ash. Let the peace of this village, this home, this night, surround you like the blanket drawn up over tired shoulders. There is nothing more to do now. You are safe, you are warm, and you are not alone. The sea will keep watch, the stars will mark time, and the longhouse will hold your dreams like it holds the quiet of this night. Sleep now, softly and completely, as the village sleeps, as the sea sings on, as the fire dreams its last flames. Sleep, dear one, and let the stillness carry you far beyond the edge of waking into the gentle embrace of night without end.